No, but like here, I had the points that they're not going to ask you your birthday, your social security, those questions. So that makes sense to have it right on this. So I'll just add that one. Yes.
I call to order this regular meeting of the Monument Board of Trustees, March 2nd, 2020. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Hogan, would you take roll, please?
Mayor Wilson?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott? Here. Trustee Bornstein? Here. Trustee Clark? Here. Trustee Goodman?
Here.
Trustee Stevens?
Here.
Trustee Romanello is noted absent.
Okay, before us we have a consent agenda. I would like to make one modification to remove October and November sales tax reports. Ms. Holmes could not make it tonight. Is there any other modifications? Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Motion. Motion to approve as amended.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Ms. Hogan?
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Trustee Bornstein?
Yes.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Goodman?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes. That motion passes 6-0. First item on the agenda, oath of office. Chief Hemingway.
I can just be loud. Can everyone hear me back there?
Oh, yeah.
Today's a proud moment for the Monument Police Department. I'd like to thank the Board of Trustees and the residents for allowing us to promote our people in front of you today. Again, it's a tremendous honor. And with that said, I'd like to bring up Commander Hudson. Would you like to bring up Commander?
I've got a whole crowd. Everybody come on up. Yeah? Come on up.
Super proud of you. Get up here. So I have a monument's coming up. Commander Hudson is accompanied by his wife Marcy, who he's been married to for 23 years now. Congratulations. And as hard as it is to be a police officer, it's equally hard to be home waiting for us to come home at night. So I know what you go through, and God bless you. Thank you. His son Justin. His brother Bobby. Where's Bobby? All right, welcome. Brother Greg, as well as several nieces and nephews, and even some great nieces and nephews. And it's kind of hard to believe as young as he looks, but some great nieces. Congratulations, and nephews. His nephew Taylor Hudson. Where's Taylor? He's a police officer with the Colorado Springs Police Department, as well as his nephew Justin Torres. Justin, who's a deputy sheriff with the El Paso County Sheriff's Department. Daughter Carly is away at Denver University right now.
She surprised me.
Oh. Yeah, that wasn't a surprise. It was much a surprise. And congratulations on your studies. So John received his bachelor's degree in criminal justice from California State University, Hayward, while he was there on a baseball scholarship. He then began his law enforcement career in 1995 for the city of Arcadia, which is located in Los Angeles County. During the 14 years with the Arcadia PD, he was assigned to uniform patrol for 10 years. He served in the Detective Bureau as well, and he was a member of their crime suppression unit, the gang unit, and also worked in narcotics. He was then assigned to the Traffic Bureau as a motorcycle officer. John was also assigned in several duties with the police department, such as SWAT for 10 years, a field training officer, the Mounted Enforcement Unit, the Force Training Unit as a firearms, less lethal, chemical, and distraction device instructor. And he also served as director for the Arcadia Police Officers Association, which was a union rep. In 2008, John and his wife Marcy decided to move to Colorado so their 2 children could grow up around family. He was hired by the Denver Police Department, where he spent over a year working with their uniformed police division down in District 6. John lateral to the Monument Police Department at the end of 2009, where he has been with Monument for the past 10 years. He spent the first 2 years assigned to the Uniform Patrol, the next 3 years as a Community Resource Officer, and in 2013 he made Sergeant and went back to patrol. In 2018, John was assigned to the Special Operations Division. In this role, he supervised investigations, traffic, community services, the Reserve Officer and Chaplains Program. He's been assigned to several duties, which include SWAT, Field Training Officer, Firearms and Less Lethal. He created the Force Training Unit, which encompasses firearms, less lethal, and taser, and arrest control. He's a member of the NRA, the National Tactical Officers Association, the International Association of Law Enforcement Firearms Instructors, the FBI Law Enforcement Executive Development Association, and the International Chiefs of Police Association. So tonight it's with great confidence that I present Commander John Hudson to this town administration, to our town board of trustees, to our Monument Police Department family, and to the residents of the town of Monument as he enters his leadership role as the rank of commander. I invite John's friends and family to accompany John as he now takes his oath of office. Please raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Jonathan Hudson,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear
or affirm
that
that I will support and bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution
I will support and bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution
and the laws of the United States of America
and the laws of the United States of America
and the state of Colorado,
and the state of Colorado,
and to the ordinances of the town of Monument,
and to the ordinances of the town of Monument,
and that I will defend and protect the lives,
and that I will defend and protect the lives,
safety, and property
safety, and property
of the people of Monument,
of the people of Monument,
that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties
that I will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties
of the office of Commander
of the office of Commander
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations. Why don't you stand in the middle? Would you guys like to take a picture with the family real quick? Why don't you hop in the middle? And if the board would just like to stand up, you can also be in a picture with Commander Hudson and family. At this time, I'd like to ask Sergeant Ryan Koski, please come forward with your friends and family.
go ahead and speak on behalf of all of us. It's an honor and a privilege to be a monument police officer. From someone who's worked for 3 different departments, Ryan's worked for 3 different departments, this is his first agency. This is a family here. I've never been a part of more of a law enforcement family and community. I always tell this story. My very first day of being a monument police officer, they teamed me up with a retired sergeant from LAPD that retired from LA and came out to Monument. And we got in the car and he was driving and we pull out onto Beacon Light and hit all the green lights till we hit 2nd Street. And we stop at Beacon Light or at 2nd and 105. And I look over and this family pulls up next to us and the driver, the dad, leans over and waves. And I looked at him and looked back at my field training officer and looked at him. He's like, "It's okay. They wave with all 5 fingers here." And I waved back and said, "Hey," and he says, "You are going to see this community loves their department." And for the past 10 years, I have seen that and then some. I'm very, very proud to be a monument police officer. I know Ryan is, and I know Brad is as well. He worked very hard to get to where he's at. So thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you all. We appreciate everything that you do, and we appreciate the board for all their dedication to our police department. It means a lot to us, knowing that you all stand behind us. So thank you very much.
Congratulations to you also, Chief, and your staff.
Thank you, sir.
Next item on the agenda, proclamation recognizing Monument's support for the goals and ideals of the 2020 census. Ms. Rankle, do you have something you would like to say for this, or?
Yes. Here we come.
Everybody can move up.
I'm on a only half bite. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for having us. This is Terry Hayes. I'm Melinda Rifle, and we're the representative for 2020 census. We are a representing monument. We just want to take a couple of minutes to tell you why it's so important that everyone participates in the census. It helps fund healthcare centers, highway planning and construction, water and waste disposal systems, educational programs in schools. It's super easy to do. It's only 10 questions. It just takes a few minutes to do it. Everything is very safe about doing this. Nobody's going to ask you for your birthday. Nobody's going to ask you your social security number. We have no citizenship questions on the census. So everything is very safe, and it will not be shared with any person or government agency. Terry?
Just a few more important facts. You're going to be able to start filling it out starting March 12th. And then it is where you live on April 1st. So if you happen to be changing locations from April 12th to March 12th to April 1st, where you're physically going to be living on April 1st is where you fill it out for. There's a non-response follow-up. You do not fill it out online. You will have someone knocking at your door, and that period is August, September point. If they cannot reach you at your door, they are actually going to ask your neighbor. about who lives there, you know, how many kids, how many adults, that kind of stuff. So we just let everybody know that because the easiest, simplest way to not have anybody knock on your door, because these days people don't like that, make sure you fill it out online. Our communities at risk are the elderly, the very young, because parents don't think they need to count their babies, but they do, and the homeless, and then also those who think the government's business is not their business. So it's our Constitution. This happens every 10 years. It is our duty to fill this out. Each year, if everyone fills it out this year, we're actually going to add a seat to our House of Representatives for our state, and that is super important. If as little as 1 out of 700 do not fill it out, we don't get that seat. That's how close that it is. The most compelling reason, good old-fashioned dollars. This is going to impact our community for the next decade. It is going to determine how $13 billion that comes into the state of Colorado is spent. It is going to support our state, our county, our communities. It works out to be $2,300 for each person. So each person that does not fill it out and chooses not to fill it out, they're depriving their state services of $2,300 for them.
That pothole's on you guys if you don't fill it out.
And our school districts, that's part of what they support also. So on the chairs are little cards that have pikespeakcensus.com, or you can go to the federal site, that's 2020census.gov, to get all the information that you need. Please reach out to Melinda or myself, and we will be glad to answer any questions. And there's a bunch of swag up here on this table. There's pens, and if you get the pens, you have to push down on the little thingy because most people think they're broken. It's a little tricky. But please help yourself. There's posters over there. If you have a public place where people can see the census, please grab posters. Any questions?
You said, Jared, relative if Monument does 100% or 99, are there dollars that will come to the town?
Absolutely.
And what might those be?
Well, for our school district, it's also for how CDOT allocates some of their funds. It's for our social services, places like Tri-Lakes Cares. So social services especially, and public safety, they actually use this information when they go for grants and when they go for needs. So a lot of this information is used not only just for dollars bringing it in, but for an opportunity to gain more dollars in based on our need.
Is there a formula similar to the schools where when they record students X amount of dollars that district gets paid? Is there something like that for?
Similar, the state will look at it as how much they allocate to each student.
So I think that's a great thing to communicate.
Absolutely.
Value to the town because we can only use dollars. Great, thank you.
Any other questions?
One question. In the past, we got something in the mail, but here you have a website.
You will still get something in the mail asking you to go online and fill it out. And then someone that is uncomfortable filling it out, there's actually ways you can do it on the telephone. You can actually request to do it face-to-face with someone. There's going to be areas, watch probably our Facebook, and I'm going to have Madeline put it out for the town of different places. If someone does not have access to computers, I know for a fact our library, Monument Library, will have computers if someone doesn't have access to them for people to use. So there's no excuse. Help your community and $2,300 each person.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Has the board read the proclamation and agreed? Trustee Goodman, please read the proclamation.
Sure. Proclamation recognizing monument support for the goals and ideals of the 2020 census. Whereas April 1st, 2020 is Census Day for the United States of America pursuant to Article 1, Section 2 of the United States Constitution, and whereas the 2020 census, a once-a-decade population count, will be open to the public to self-report on March 12, 2020, and will continue through July 31st with an ideal deadline of May 12th to complete the census. And whereas an accurate census is required for the proper apportionment of representatives with the legislative bodies of the United States House of Representatives and Colorado State Legislature, and is used in the redistricting of state and county voting districts. whereas the correct allocation of federal dollars for infrastructure, public health, education, transportation, child and elder care, food assistance, emergency preparedness, disaster response, and many other critical programs and services depends on complete and accurate age, population, and other demographic information gathered every 10 years. And whereas information collected by the United States Census Bureau is confidential and protected by law, and any data related to the census can only be released in aggregate form that does not identify individual respondents, and whereas the town of Monument includes a portion of communities that are historically undercounted in decennial census due to dispersed locations, mountains and rural areas, transitory housing status, language diversity, undercounted age groups such as children, under 5 and older adults, and concerns about the use of the collected data by the federal government that make a fair and accurate count more challenging and which require deliberate engagement by local partners to ensure a high response rate and an accurate census. And whereas the town of Monument does hereby desire to support the efforts of the Pikes Peak Area Complete Count Committee for the purpose of planning and conducting local initiatives and promotional activities to increase community participation in the 2020 census. Therefore, the town of Monument, by virtue of the authority vested in us, commit to supporting the work of the Pikes Peak Area Complete County Committee and further pledge our support to ensuring a complete and accurate 2020 census for the town of Monument, proclaimed this second day of March 2020.
Good job.
Thank you. Item 5 on the agenda, presentation, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. Mr. Thornish, will you introduce our guest, please?
Yes, tonight we have representatives from the Colorado Department of Public Health and also from the EPA. I want to introduce Haley Orhood, Compliance Specialist, Tyson Ingles, Lead Drinking Water Engineer, Tom Simmons, Health Assessor of the EPA, Bob Benson, PhD, Toxicologist. Come on up.
Hi everyone, my name is Mary Ann Mason. I'm also the Communications Manager at the State Health Department. Thank you, Board and Mayor, for having us tonight. So we're here to talk about radium and drinking water. So to kind of start it off, before I let these guys kind of actually put a name to the face, I just wanted to give a little bit of context of what radium is. So radium is naturally occurring here in Colorado, and it primarily actually happens in the Front Range and in the Arkansas Valley. It comes from rocks, and so it can enter our groundwater, which systems such as Monument use in order to deliver drinking water. So the federal agencies, they create a standard for radium in which public water systems are required to meet. And we, as the state health agency, help enforce that and regulate that, make sure public water systems are meeting that standard. Currently, Monument is below that standard, but we understand, there's some questions about that, and so we're here to just basically open it up to the floor to everyone here, just to see what you guys want to know and what information we can provide. For me, I'm going to be helping, just maybe if there's a lot of questions happening at one time, I'm here to maybe help organize the conversation. So if it's okay with you guys, I was going to let the public maybe ask questions first, and then move over to the board, and then just open it up for open dialogue after that, if that works for everyone. So with that, I'll let these guys, again, reintroduce themselves so you guys can put a name to the face.
My name is Haley Orhood. I'm with the Department of Public Health and Environment. I'm with the Drinking Water Compliance Assurance Section. I work as a compliance specialist, and I'm actually the compliance specialist for the town of Monument. So my role is to ensure that public water systems are in compliance with Colorado drinking water regulations.
My name is Tom Simmons. I'm a risk assessor with CDPHE, and my primary role is to evaluate the health risks associated with environmental contaminants.
And I'm Tyson Ingles. I'm the lead drinking water engineer for the State Health Department. I wear a lot of hats, but one of which is to work on new technologies and best technologies to treat certain contaminants for drinking water. Another hat I wear is to respond to emergency situations like the 2013 floods or the Waldo Canyon fire, those types of things. And generally just work as a technical expert for drinking water throughout the state.
Bob, can we have you come up if you are able?
Our colleague from EPA
Yeah.
should introduce himself.
Yeah,
too.
and I'm Bob Benson. I'm a toxicologist at the EPA Denver office. We deal with what we call Region 8 states, North and South Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Utah, and Colorado. I spend most of my time supporting the drinking water program in the Region 8 office. As I said, I'm a toxicologist, and I can try to answer any background questions you have about the drinking water standards that EPA puts in place. What are the health risks of exposure to radium-226 and 228 that are in your drinking water, and how worried or concerned you should be about this, and what is likely to happen in the future, if I can take guesses. Because I don't know we don't know what's going to happen with the water seems to be fluctuating in levels. We don't know if that is just naturally variations or whether there's some kind of a trend going up because of the water quality has changed and it's dissolving more of the radium isotopes out of the rocks. We don't know, and we can't predict that.
Great, thanks, Bob. Perfect, yeah. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. Anyone have anything to start off with? Yes?
So I asked this at our town meeting, but what's the limit? What's our levels at? And what constitutes a violation? And if you have, say, trending information, that would be appreciated too.
So, yeah, I can speak to some of that. So the limit that has been set by EPA and that the state regulates for combined radium and drinking water is 5 picocuries per liter. So in the past, the town of Monument has exceeded this level. However, currently they are below the level. So we have seen the values fluctuating a little bit, as Bob mentioned, and maybe trending upwards slightly. But currently the levels are below that 5 picocuries per liter. When we look at compliance for, so that comes down to rounding and significant figures. So Bob can probably, or Tom could maybe talk about that a little bit more. So since it is 5 instead of 5.0 picocuries per liter, we round it down. So a 5.3 would be considered less than or equal to the standard set by EPA, which is not a violation. So I know that's
It's a great question.
Yeah, it's a good question.
If the value, the running average for the last 4 quarters was equal to 5.6 or greater, it would round to 6, that it would be a violation according to the EPA regulation.
And we do base compliance off of a running annual average. So right now the town of Monument is doing quarterly monitoring for combined radium. So we take an average of the last 4 quarters of data, and that's what we use as a compliance value. So we're not looking at an individual value per quarter.
And that's the way the EPA rule is structured. So Colorado is following the rule as a trend.
I thought I saw it.
Yeah, I did. I was just asking, how did you come up with that compliance value 5 to begin with? How was that the standard set?
Yeah, that is a very good question. EPA has a very long process for putting what we call maximum contaminant levels, MCLs, in place. It starts with a review of the health information that we have available on the chemicals that we intend to regulate. All of that information, all the scientific information is assembled, evaluated by EPA scientists. It's then put into reports and summary documents. Those are put out into a peer review process. So we get a group of knowledgeable scientists review that information and say, okay, EPA, we think you did this analysis adequately, or we think you should have done this instead, or this other thing instead. We want you to revise your assessment and do it over again. So that sometimes we'll go through multiple loops. And then once EPA decides, and the peer reviewers decide on the science, then we decide what the level should actually be to protect the public health. For radium and for the radium isotopes, we decided that was 5 picocuries per liter. Picocurie is a measure of radiation. If you had a Geiger counter, it would be how many times that Geiger counter clicked in a certain amount of time. Then it goes through that proposed rule, goes through a public comment period where everybody in the country can submit comments on whether they agree, don't agree, don't think it's right, you should have done this. Then we have to evaluate all those comments, and then we publish a final rule. Again, that is, there's another public comment period for the final rule. Where again, the entire public can submit comments. And we went through that process multiple times for the radium nuclides, and that was because there were changes in the Safe Drinking Water Act that the Congress made. The original rule was published in, I think, 1976. Then there was another version in 1991, another one in 1996, and then a final rule in 2001. So this rule has been in place since 2001.
Yeah, and
that was a long
well,
answer.
yeah, and I'm going to even make it longer. Just when if you're new to drinking water, it's important to know that there's sort of 2 families of things to worry about in drinking water. There's things you can drink that will make you sick, like right now. So if you go to a creek or a reservoir and you just take a glass of water and drink it, there's pathogens, things like Cryptosporidium, Giardia. If you drink that, or E. coli bacteria, you'll probably get sick today or tomorrow or a couple weeks from now. So that's what we call acute contamination. So water systems that do treat surface waters like creeks and reservoirs, they filter and disinfect the water to make sure people don't get sick from that type of contamination. Other cities and towns around the state take deep groundwater that's protected from that kind of contamination, but then also layering on top of that, we put chlorine in the water and distribute it in all the pipes around the town to make sure that if any recontamination gets in, just incidental, that chlorine residual keeps the public safe, again, from those immediate diseases. So it's acute contamination, and then there's a long list of compounds, 96 is specific, that is regulated by EPA, that if you drink over a lifetime will cause other health effects. And so it's just important to kind of understand those 2 families. So the radionuclides that Bob's talking about are in the long-term health effects bucket.
Yeah, and they are carcinogens. I forgot to mention that. They will cause cancer in people.
So if you ever think about priority in water, we always do the thing that will keep people from getting sick today, and then the utility on top of that does the treatment to make sure that the long-term risks are minimized. But it's a kind of a twofold yes and approach to drinking water.
No matter what the level is, EPA says 5, right? You still have the risk. If it was 4, it was 3. You still have the same risk, right?
Well, it's
because it's water.
different. I looked through the data for the last 4 quarters and combined the radium-226 and the radium-228. I did them separately because they have different cancer risk values. And the combined risk from the last value, which was 5.3 picocuries per liter, was on the order of 5 in 100,000 lifetime excess cancer risk. So that means that if 100,000 people drank this water for a lifetime, 5 of them might get cancer from the radium in the water. That's compared with your normal risk of cancer over a lifetime living in the United States is 1 in 4 or 1 in 3. So in comparison, the risk from this water is very low. I can't say it's insignificant, but it is very low.
Yes.
I noticed you're using picos, parts per trillion, I've heard, nucleotides. For most of us, listen, I majored in music because I didn't have to count higher than 8. So when you talk with these words, I don't understand. Is there a way to see what does picos mean? What does it, I mean, we turn the water on, it's there, we use it. We don't think much about it, and then we pay the bill. Is there any easy way to see what does that mean? Parts per trillion. What are you looking for? And then my next question is, if this water here were flowing into your homes, would you drink it?
Me personally, I would. But everybody has to make their own choice. And that's why your public water supply is providing all of this information to the residents, as they should be doing. I've seen the reports and the values that have been put together by the town and have shared with you. There's also, EPA requires that the public water supplies provide every 5 years, I believe, the consumer confidence report.
1 year per year.
So once per year, okay, yeah. And they have to then report in that consumer confidence report what they monitored for, what the values were, what the EPA standards are, and the individual values that they got. And they have to explain all the words in the consumer confidence report. So that's the best way to get a primer on drinking water, is get a hold of the consumer confidence report. If there are things that are not clear in there, ask your town public works director.
Yeah.
Or you can call EPA.
So like in one sense, we could have like an hour lecture on what different units are of different contaminants. And I know you don't want that. I'm a chemical engineer and I'd love to like just bore everybody. But in the other sense, it's important to understand the power of the toxicology that goes into an EPA and the careful consideration. And so when EPA, they take a long time to set a limit on a certain contaminant, and a lot of serious consideration about health risk and what's acceptable to the public or not. But it is important to put stock in their numbers, and that if you read other numbers just by Googling, that those are not created equal. If EPA says a number is relatively low risk, there's a lot behind it. So that's why we don't spend a lot of time on the units, but we say, look, here's the EPA limit, and here's where your water is, and there is some power behind it. So it's worth considering.
I want to make sure that answers your question, because I think it's a good one. But I see you're busy. We'll get back to that. And again, if anyone, we get this is complicated, and so I really appreciated that question, because we want to take the time to make sure everyone understands it, and it helps us, getting this feedback of what we can do better, to explain things. So please, like, if anything, if you didn't hear anything or didn't understand anything, please ask that. That is really important to us. Yes.
The concern I have is, so the trend is going upward. In 2018, it was 4.6. 2019, it was 5.3, if I understand from the other meeting from the other day. So in 1 year, it trended up, to me, a significant amount. So should there be a concern that before 2021 that we're going to be in the red zone?
That's a great question. So, and I think what Bob was saying before, again, jump in here, anyone, is that, it is difficult to forecast what it will be in the future. Unfortunately, radium is this isotope or element or contaminant, whatever you might refer to it. It's difficult. The science is very difficult. So predicting it, we don't know. From our conversations with public water department, it sounds like, and that's what we like to see, is that there are conversations happening. They're recognizing the levels are increasing, and they're trying to take those proactive steps and having the conversations. That's why we're all here today, right, to talk about it, to look at what the options are, and get that conversation happening about what is feasible. Monument, I do look to you guys though, of course, if you guys need to add anything on there or CDPH.
One thing that makes this complicated is that very often the levels of these chemicals in groundwater depend, among other things, on the recharge rate of the aquifer. How much snow are you getting? How much of that water from the snow is going to actually get into the aquifer that's dissolving the radium out of the rocks? And it depends also on the quality of that water. What's its pH? How many other ions are in the water? And there's just no way of predicting. And that's why it's really good that the community, I think, is monitoring now quarterly, which they are required to do, so that they can map the trends and try to predict what's going on, and they could take into account how much snowfall you got in this area and how much of that snow is likely to have gotten into the aquifer. It's very complicated.
And I want to jump on, and if it's okay. So can you go back to the chronic versus acute, and when we talk about, let's say you guys do exceed that standard, right, of the 5.6 was that exact number. Exactly what happens? Is it, again, you get sick right away? What do people expect?
Right, so when it comes to drinking water contaminants in the chronic world, or the things we worry about over a lifetime, the reason Haley was talking about that we calculated over an annual average is because having a few glasses of water over the limit isn't really a health concern. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about living in a community where you're constantly exposed to that water over an entire lifetime. So that's why we're more concerned with long-term trends than like one quarter versus another quarter, and it can kind of go up and down and be okay. Do you have anything to add to that? Okay.
Does that help?
Well, and so the concern is, we're trending up, and we all have, we all have homes, but a lot of us own homes here, and we don't want to be on the news for having bad water and all of our home values go down.
Yes.
So the concern, even though it's not a concern today for immediate sickness, it could be a concern today for home values going down if the wrong people get a hold of this information.
True. So we can't speak, of course, to real estate and what those market trends are. That's not, unfortunately, our expertise. What we can say, though, is that this is this situation is not uncommon. As I talked about, radium is found pretty much all along the Front Range. And in the Arkansas Valley as well. So we do have communities who are facing the same situation. And that, I don't know if that provides any useful information, but at this point, that's all we can say.
But we do think it's important for communities to do long-term planning and make sure the water is below the limit. So that's, we're working with Monument for that specific purpose.
And if those levels do continue to trend upwards, we do have measures in place where if violations are issued, we do require water systems to take some sort of action. So they will have to evaluate their current treatment processes and sources and determine what needs to be done in order to return to compliance. So it's not something that we will just let continue. If the levels stay below the maximum contaminant level, we can't enforce someone to actually do something at that time, but County of Monument has been very proactive in doing that so far, but we do have measures in place, whether it's issuing a violation or formal enforcement, that allows us to require a regulated entity to explore options for treatment or resources.
And one of those steps is actually hiring professional engineers.
Yeah, and it's, yes, not just install some sort of treatment. They're required to do a full evaluation conducted by a professional engineer who explores all of the different options, cost analyses, long-term compliance, and submit formal design plans and specifications to CDPHE to be reviewed by our engineering section. So it's definitely a vetted process, and have to run things by us before anything is actually implemented.
Yes, thank you.
So I think it was 2016 when we were in violation. 15, 16?
It spanned 2016 to 2017.
So, if I'm wrong, I was at the meeting the other day, so correct me if I'm wrong. Right? So, it was mentioned that we're in violation. I don't know if an expert, like you mentioned, was called in. And the recommendation, how I understood it was from CEPT was blend your water from another well. So when they did that, is that the reason that the water levels went down? Are we still blending now? And if not, or if we are, is the blending not working now because now the levels are going up? Or did we stop blending upon the state's recommendations? So now that if we're in violation again, is it going to be the same recommendation as blending? Or do we go to the next step of, let's do some other permanent fix instead of, let's patch this up and see if it works?
Right, yeah, so initially, the town of Monument did get an engineer, and they decided at that time that that was probably the most viable option. It was something that was approved by our engineering section. I can't say it was a recommendation, since we don't recommend things to water systems as far as treatment necessarily. We allow them to have a third-party engineer to do a full analysis. If there are exceedances in the future, they will have to do a full analysis, not just looking at blending. They'll have to look at, all viable treatment options, finding a different source. So it will be a pretty in-depth analysis. As far as current operations for blending, I can't speak to that necessarily. And there are probably a lot of factors that go into that. It could be, as Bob talked about, that we are just seeing that naturally occurring radium concentrations increasing in the well where they have that high radium. And that's hard to say for sure. So, I hope that answers your question.
Somewhat of a related note, I understand there are a lot of people in this area, depending on where they live, that might have private wells that neither the state nor EPA regulate. But if you know someone who has a private well, I would urge them to have their water tested for radiums, just to make sure. Because I don't know how the aquifer flows in this area.
It's a good point. Every well can be different.
Yes.
And so it's important that, as you were saying, every owner who has their private well and they're using for drinking water, test that. Because, I think we've seen certain situations where one well, 100 feet away might be very different from that well, 100 feet the other direction.
You don't have a geologist up here tonight, but we're a mining state originally, right? Like, there's gold veins in the rocks, there's radium veins in the rocks, there's uranium veins in the rocks. People put down wells, and if you are near one of those areas, rich in that particular chemical, then the water will have it in it. So you don't have to worry about gold in your water, but you would have all different type of things depending upon where you sink a well, and there isn't really a special meter that you can walk out there with and say, if I drop a well 2,000 feet right here, I'll be good. 100 feet over here, I won't be good. It doesn't really work like that. To some degree, you get what you get, and wells are very expensive to drill, so you don't just go drill 200 of them and pick the best one. It doesn't really work like that.
Is everyone hearing us okay? I want to make sure there's that too. Okay, great. Any other questions? And I was saying earlier, I hope we answered your question too.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Should we? Oh, yes.
Have you had a chance to look at what the town of Monument has came up with for the possibility of removing the radium, or at least decreasing it? The plan that they have?
I've not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it hasn't been formally required by the state yet for them to explore a different option. However, if and when they do decide to, or decide on an option, it will have to be submitted to us for review and approval before they can do any sort of construction or installation of treatment or utilizing a new source.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it either, but EPA typically will put in the Federal Register announcement that establishes the maximum contaminant level, recommended treatment options to remove contaminants.
And radium is fairly easy to get out of the water. Just to talk about treatment for a minute, I don't want to geek out on this too much with my chemical engineering, but it's not really getting it out of the water. What becomes a problem in the treatment of radium is disposal of the waste. Because the waste you generate from the treatment process becomes radioactive, then you have to pay to throw that waste away somehow. You can't just dump it out on the ground, that's not how the law works. So the utility has to really, when they work with an engineer, they got to think about that too. It's not just, let's get it out of the drinking water, it's where are we at, what are we going to do with the waste? Water bills can't be $400 or $800 a month. I mean, there's a lot they got to balance with maintaining the pipes and all the pieces they have to do to keep water flowing to every home. So that's why we really want them to come up with a long-term sustainable plan and not just pick some random technology. I will say we do, as Mary Ann indicated, there are systems around the state that treat for radium. There really are 3 technologies: reverse osmosis, ion exchange, which just looks like a filter vessel, and then this thing called hydrous manganese oxide. It's putting a chemical in and pulling the radium out. So it's not an unknown science on how to get it out. It's more the package of how to do that sustainably and economically to make it so that it'll work going into the future.
So if they had a plan to start taking care of this, or at least reducing it to a safer point, would it be your recommendation, or would you say it would be a good time right now to get started on something like that rather than hold it back? Or rather than
I might look at the utility to answer that question more.
Well, I mean, do you think now is a good time to, when we're at 5.2 or 5.3, to come up with a plan to start taking care of the water and to get that in motion right now? Or is there time?
So water and wastewater utilities always have a lot of priorities they have to balance.
Right.
And I just want to put that out there because they also have to make sure the pipes flow, that water is delivered to every house consistently. Most people generally have water at their tap. It's kind of a unique thing in the United States compared to other countries around the world. They also have to make sure the wastewater works and the collection pipes flow, and they have to maintain all of that infrastructure first and foremost as well. So that's why every individual community has their own top priority of any individual day. I don't know that we would say this is the priority today versus all the priorities.
Yeah, so I think this is a boundary between, what the state regulates versus kind of what is that proactive, above and beyond measure. So of course, the state loves to see being proactive and trying to figure this out. Can we regulate it? Can we enforce it? Can we put, a formal statement out there that says, go monument, go? We recognize that, we're trying to balance, you as a community are trying to balance a lot of other projects and costs. And so that's why, part of what goes into the analysis and in that public comment period that Bob was talking about when defining that level, that 5 unit, part of that is looking at cost and what can communities really do, that balance between public health, what's feasible, and that's where a lot of public comments and stakeholder input is generated. So in this situation, of course, we're excited to see Monument be proactive because there are increasing levels, but if you guys, were to decide as a community that there's other priorities, then I would say at the state, we totally understand that, but if it hit that 5.6 and we see that average going on, that's where we step in and we regulate and we want to make sure public health is protected. Does that help?
From the EPA point of view, it's always pays to plan ahead. But as Marion said, the town has to balance their priorities. But it's a good thing to have plans in place, depending on what happens.
So basically, since it was up in 16, it's up in 19, or whatever the years are, the state's not concerned the monument has an issue with the water? And what kind of, so you guys wouldn't make any, let's say it gets to 5.6, that's another violation. 2 violations in 3 years or 2 years, whatever it is. That doesn't alarm you guys to say, Monument, you need to be more than proactive. You need to start doing something.
The way our state regulations are defined, we don't take action until those averages happen at that 5.6 level. That's that, we call it, the line in the sand. There has to be some sort of decision point. And so as EPA underwent, their rulemaking, that was that line in the sand of when the state jumps in. We, of course, come in as a state to give advice, to talk about it, just like we are doing now, because we want to, support in any way we can. But when you're asking us, when do we become concerned? We've got that line in the sand when it hits that 5.6, that running average, then that's where we jump in and we say, okay, the system has to take action.
Does it become more expensive for us if we wait for you guys to jump in? Are there fines and do the costs become much more expensive when we wait until it's too late, in a sense?
So the short answer to that, I would say, is no. So we do not issue fines or penalties for these naturally occurring chronic contaminants. Where you would see, fines or penalties come in as a system that is just not monitoring or not taking any sort of action. So I think what the system is doing now is pretty similar to what we would require if they do exceed the maximum contaminant level. If and when it gets to the point where they do exceed, like I said, we will require them to do a full engineering evaluation. We will require them to do a professional engineer, to submit, design plans and specifications for whatever treatment technology they choose, and then actually, install or implement it. So I think, without us requiring them to do any of that, those are probably the steps that any, system would go through anyways. They still have to have a professional engineer. They still have to submit information to us for review and approval. So I can't say definitively whether there would be a big cost difference, but we don't implement any sort of fine or penalty system for situations like this. We'd much rather the system use that money to put towards addressing the issue and installing some sort of treatment.
So what's the time frame on an approval? The Monument come and said, we want to do this. Is it like the government? Is it down here to where it'll get up there eventually? Or is that something that's can be a priority and can move to where this needs to be approved a month, 2 months? Or is it going to be a year and a half, 2 years? I've seen those cases before.
Is the question about how long our engineering group would take to...
If we come back and say, Town of Monument says we want to do a reverse osmosis, okay? How long does it take the EPA or whoever to approve that?
It's our group, it's the engineering group at the State Health Department. We're chronically understaffed, but we have a prioritization matrix, and we prioritize communities that are in violation of a health-based standard that this would be kind of over all else. So there are some communities out there around the state that are not filtering surface water, so they would probably take priority. I talked about treated in glass. But generally speaking, people over health-based standards always prioritize. We wouldn't take more than 2 to 5 months to get a review in. That would be kind of our general time period.
Yes, sir.
How are the other communities in comparison, say like Colorado Springs, Castle Rock, with their levels, and if their levels were higher, they had the same problems, what actions have they taken as a comparison to what we had in mind?
So a lot of that will depend on the source of their water. So Colorado Springs utilities utilizes surface water. So they're not drawing water from these deep wells that are in the rock that naturally has radium. So it does really, it's very dependent on the source of the water. So some of the bigger communities, Denver Water, Colorado Springs utilities, are all utilizing surface water, which just based off of the nature of it is very low in radium. I mean, there's certainly other contaminants you have to worry about, but we really just see it in systems that are utilizing groundwater, so well water. As Marianne kind of talked about and Bob talked about, we unfortunately in Colorado do have, occurrence of naturally occurring radium in well water, kind of confined to a more localized area in Arkansas Valley, Paso County, Teller County. So it kind of depends on the area, it depends on what aquifer your well has been drilled into. But they're all held to the same standards. We regulate public water systems equally as far as community systems, and they all have to treat their water to the same standards.
So I think, and I don't know if this gets more to your question, but when we're looking at other systems and what they've done, some systems have looked at a different water source. Sometimes they use it for blending, sometimes they might just pull from that water source, or on some occasions then they treat for the radium using special technology that Tyson talked a little bit about before. So yeah, every system is a bit different.
And in the Castle Rock sense, just specifically because they're nearby, they have deep wells. They just don't happen to have that radionuclide contamination. They have more iron and manganese in that water, and they filter that out. But that's just where their wells happen to be. That turns the water rusty, color black. It doesn't have as big a health threats, I guess, probably treats some manganese differently, but they generally get that out of the water through a big filter plant. But a Castle Rock is a population of well over 50,000, so it's a kind of a different economy of scale at that kind of a city.
We don't have the data of other systems to speak specifically.
I don't recall any violations in Colorado of the radium standard, but.
Oh, we have some.
But the program's delegated to the state, so they would have the primary jurisdiction, and EPA would really only get involved if they didn't do what they were supposed to do. And then I don't deal with that, it's other people, legal staff gets involved with that.
We do.
Any other questions, you guys? Anything we need to repeat or go over again? Happy to do that. Should I open it up to the board?
At this time, we'll turn it over to the board. Trustee Koopman?
I've got a handful, and a lot of it is clarification. It's my understanding the EPA said that level of 5 is kind of that threshold to go off of, which the state bases it off of. There was a significant amount of leeway or room there. The numbers that are truly, I guess what level constitutes an emergency based off of that, right? So you're talking a baseline of 5, we're at 5.3 on average. What constitutes an emergency? Where CDPHE comes in, EPA comes in, they go, do not drink the water.
We don't have a value for radionuclide since it's based on a chronic lifetime cancer risk. We don't have a value.
So there's not a value for an acute reaction to what?
Usually we only set acute standards for chemicals that cause effects immediately. Not true. Good babies or there are some other ones, nerve agents, for example, that cause infection. Radium's not one of those. It's the only health effect we know of is the long-term cancer effect from exposure.
So knowing that it can be common to kind of spike at times, which is probably why we do multiple samples throughout the year, is there any entity that you know of kind of in our region who has had this issue where obviously it's spiking, it's going down, it's doing the different things, where they've gone from always having it present to completely getting rid of it? They have a level of 0.
In a naturally occurring way?
No, not in a natural, through treatment.
We do have a number of water systems, not positive right in this area, but in El Paso and Collier County, that I personally do compliance for, who have historically had high levels, probably about the range that Monument is seeing right now, and have installed treatment and have levels now that are well below the MCL. So
They're already at 0 though.
Usually you're not going to see that with treatment. Tyson can probably speak to this a little bit more than I do. When you're treating the water, you usually don't treat 100% of it just because it's very costly to do so and to replace the media. it's quite expensive. So you'll treat a portion of it and blend it back in with untreated water. So to treat to zero would probably be quite costly, not impossible certainly. But I think we don't necessarily see levels that are non-detect when people are treating to have naturally occurring radium, but can certainly get levels quite low.
Most of the treatment systems that EPA recommends for this and other chemicals will typically remove 80 to 90% of the contaminant. If they can't do that good, it's not a viable technology that we would recommend.
Last question, and EPA specific, it sounds like the last kind of change or major overhaul to those numbers or laws or regulations was 2001, so about 19 years. Is this something you're gradual or constantly monitoring to change those if needed?
There is a mandatory, what we call 6-year review, where EPA will pick a number of standards and look for new health effects information and look at treatment technologies and whether there's new science that would warrant changing the standard, either to a higher value or a lower value. I cannot remember the last time we looked at the radium clouds. Since they're all cancer effects, nobody's doing, I shouldn't say nobody, it's rare that new science comes out on chemicals that are carcinogens, unless there's information that's gathered by somebody who's probing the mechanism of action. But typically the kind of work that's done for radiation is not very useful for the public.
Thank you very much.
Again, thank you to both entities for coming. And our town is trying to be very proactive, so I think it's great to hear. I have 3 questions. The first one, in our public works director shared as far as samples we're taking, waiting for results in 2019. Have you seen those numbers? Because having both the entities here, both groups, have you visually seen those as of yet?
I'm not sure which ones I've seen. I've got it written, the dates of the samples, but I don't know if there are more pending or not. I think the last ones I saw were from August.
We've seen
2019,
up
I'm not
to
sure.
fourth quarter 2018 data. So they're required to submit all their data.
So it hasn't crossed your desk yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah.
And I understand there's a backup, and
Yeah,
you're
labs
very
are pretty
busy, so.
busy right now. But yeah, as soon as we get the first quarter 2020 data, and we'll communicate with the water system operator and evaluate what the levels are.
Secondary question, and I appreciate the numbers you've shared as far as when this initiated, because I took the liberty of reaching out to Washington, and they're saying the same thing. It's 2097 when these were updated. My question to you is, a lot of things have changed in the last 20 years, and we didn't used to monitor and have alerts when there's contaminants in the air from people with respiratory diseases, etc. Back then, testing for children, things of this nature, didn't seem really existent. And you shared with me this number, 5 in 100,000. Could be low, but it sucks if you're one of those 5. 100%. So not to beat a dead horse, but there's so many variables, and not to throw it on the EPA, because I assume Colorado will follow the EPA. That's what your job is.
Yeah,
where are you going?
Well, as far as we know, the only significant health endpoint from exposure to radium ingested is long-term effects from cancer endpoint. And it generally takes long-term exposure before that adverse health effect appears. And part of it is because the way these radionuclides cause damage is they give off particles from the nucleus that interact with cells in your body and cause mutations. And it depends on how many of those particles hit a vulnerable place in your DNA that causes a mutation in your cell, and then that mutated cell loses its ability to control its growth and starts growing, and you get, eventually get a tumor. But we don't know, for example, whether children might be more susceptible to that. I have not seen a chemical that's a carcinogen that is more detrimental to children. Well, we've got studies to show that. At least I can't recall it.
So would it be a fair assumption, because it is some 20 years back, that it was very generic as far as when the tolerances, as I call them, or levels were set, because we look at so much more today than we did back then?
Yeah, but the cancer endpoint has not changed in all this time. We understand the mechanism in terms of the mutation potential of the chemical. We have long-term studies in humans, people, showing that radium does cause cancer in people that were exposed at high levels. And that's the data that we use.
My last question.
And there's, as far as I know, there's nothing real reason. I suspect that the standards for radium, I didn't look this up, I should have, they were probably in an occupational group that was exposed to radium.
So it was a controlled
radium watches, okay.
So I want to make sure that we're addressing your question. So if I'm hearing you correctly, from 2001, right, is when you mentioned the years when you looked at this. And so I think the question I'm hearing you is, have things changed? Has health changed, these past 20 years? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yes, this gentleman's answering that question.
He did answer.
Yeah, because the
Great.
foundation of what was done 20 years ago and things we look at today are different. But he didn't answer my question, because relative to whatever test group you did was not related to elderly and children and things of that nature. That's what I was looking for.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we did clarify that.
And my last one, and you guys shared, I think this is fantastic. If we're looking at a solution, and we're going to discuss it tonight, but we can actually, before we approve a solution and generate dollars, we can give the solution submitted to you, and based on your expertise, you go, you know what, we think it's great. Or say, hey, you might want to look at A or B before we go through our process. So we're doing the right thing and we're not reinventing the wheel. That's a service
that would be CDPHE's role.
Which is fantastic, because there are choices, but you all are the experts. Okay, thank you so
But it
much.
says EPA delegates the program to CDPHE to run. It would be their choice as to whether, how they wanted to devote their resources to reviewing things ahead of time.
Okay, so again, we come to you, this is a process we're looking at based on your knowledge. You go, hey, that's a great solution, and then we can go off on our way.
I don't know that we use the word great like that. We have our own language, but we definitely.
I committed to my town manager this evening that I was going to be optimistic.
Okay, I don't want you to be disappointed if the word great is any
Your information has been fantastic. Thank you very much.
I do want to go back to one point that you made, because I think it's really good. So you were talking about like populations that were studied and those who might be more vulnerable. So those are considered in the toxicological studies. And I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Right, and I think just the only thing I was going to add to what Bob was saying is that the mechanism of the way that radium causes cancer, it kind of is directly interacting with the cell, like Bob was saying, and that's thought to be protective both of fetuses and children.
But the question I'm asking, were these numbers and studies based on the investigation of children? And your colleagues in DC say no. They say it was there was a very flat test group. I'm not an expert.
Yeah, you kind of, a lot of times you use the data you have and then you extrapolate back to certain scenarios. But in this case, it's really that mechanism of action and interaction with the cell itself you know, it doesn't, it's thought to be protective of children and even fetuses as well.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, now that Tyson jogged that memory, the study population was people who were painting radium dials, and they would lick their paintbrush to make a sharp point and then write the number on the watch and then lick it again. So they were ingesting radium at high levels because that was their job, their full-time job.
Higher than the 5.
Way
Significantly
higher
higher than the 5.
I didn't. The actual exposure levels that were used in the studies. I didn't find out about this until Friday afternoon, so I didn't have time to do as much background refreshing my memory as I had hoped to.
I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Trustee Clark?
I want to thank you guys too for coming in. I really appreciate the time and the expertise. And I only have 2 questions, but one is fairly lengthy. So whoever wants to jump in and answer that second question, you know, or you can all try for it. Are you all willing to testify in a court of law as an expert witness on carcinogens in the public drinking water?
I have done that, but you have to go through a process of asking the region administration whether they will allow me to do that.
So I'll just put a yes on that one. Okay. And can any or all or one of you please compare the detriments and benefits of renewable water and the expectancy of finding the presence of radium in renewable water versus well water, aquifer water?
What do you mean by renewable water?
Surface water.
No. Radium typically does not occur in surface water.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Radium typically does not occur in surface water to any great extent. It as was said, it comes from the rocks and the water interacting with the rocks on the ground.
So in renewable water, we would not have the radium issue occurring. Am I hearing you right?
That's my supposition. I don't know of a surface water body that would have large amounts of radium in it now that nobody makes radium dials anymore.
Well,
but there might be.
Just if you think of the mining towns like Silverton in the western slope that are impacted by acid mine drainage, that might not be totally accurate because those are flowing streams, but they're coming out of mines. So
True.
Colorado with a rich mining history, it very much depends on the water source and the very specific watershed you're talking about. If you're talking about surface waters. Every surface water has its own kind of challenges and unique cocktail of things. So it's kind of not a general category of renewable, it's very specific.
Yeah, and it would depend on if there was a radium mine in that particular area.
But we have a lot of uranium mining in Colorado,
Or
not so much radium mining, and that's a different thing. And that's more west slope, but it's definitely out there. I don't want to say there's no flowing water with some radionuclides in it.
I don't know of any.
Right.
So the benefits and the detriments, if we had a choice between renewable surface water resources versus aquifer, deep well water resources, which would be our best bet for getting to the zero amount of radium as possible?
Well, it depends on what's in the surface water that you want to use, because it's going to have all kinds of other chemicals in it that you're going to have to deal with if we have standards for it.
But I'm just mostly concerned about the radium.
Yeah, but you could be trading one risk for another one if you don't worry about all the other chemicals in the water. And EPA has, and the state enforces standards for 95 other chemicals or 94 other chemicals. And you got to have, your water has to be in compliance with every one of them.
Understood. Yeah. So the benefits and the detriments, if you had to choose, which is the safest, cleanest, purest water we could provide our residents?
I can't answer that because I don't know the quality of the surface water that you have available.
Yeah, so Haley mentioned, earlier that we require that professional engineering review. So all those questions would like to go into that review. For us, We don't provide any recommendations. We review those studies. We make sure that they're going to meet all contaminants and that we're not, again, just addressing one contaminant but not the other. So that would be part of that process.
Understood. I just wanted to find out what the benefits and the detriments would be for both of those water sources.
I think there's pros and cons to all water portfolios. Our general conversation to all growing cities and towns, what we hear from them, actually cities and towns are a lot more experts than we are. We're the water quality people. It's a whole different world of water quantity people who do the water rights and figure out where you're going to buy water, how you're going to sustain a community that's growing fast. Castle Rock was mentioned earlier. They have both deep groundwater and surface water rights. Colorado Springs was mentioned. They have like fresh snow melt right up by Leadville and Homestead Reservoir, which they got those water rights a long, long time ago. And so what's available to a town is very specific to the town's history, portfolio, water rights, what they can acquire today versus what they may have had historically. And we are not expert. I don't think anybody up here would want to say that we understand.
I'm just asking about the benefits and what would be the pros and cons for each water resource.
Well, every surface water has to be treated to surface water standards. So that means you will filter and disinfect it and dispose of all the waste you generate filtering it, disinfecting it. And it can be made quite pristine. You know, Colorado Springs, Castle Rock, Denver, all big cities, they all do it and they do a good job of it, but it is not a small task. It is a pretty large water treatment plant that generates its own things. So we're confident that people can treat surface water to appropriate levels to be safe. We're confident that people can treat groundwater to appropriate levels to be safe. They're just two different challenges, really.
But where radium is concerned, the challenge is greater in the aquifer situation, is it not?
Correct. The deep groundwaters have more radium than the surface waters, for sure.
Thank you.
Trustee Stevens?
Hopefully a quick question. Someone mentioned to me this week, said I'm only going to drink bottled water, which kind of piqued my curiosity, and I looked up water quality reports on bottled water, and I saw radium in the bottled water. And so, so I guess that kind of made me think, how possible is it, or how, maybe it's just too costly, or is it just not possible to get radium down to a 0 level?
Let me answer part of that question. EPA does not regulate bottled water. The Food and Drug Administration has jurisdiction over bottled water that is sold across state lines. If, for example, water was bottled in Colorado, sold in Colorado, nobody has control over it. Food and Drug uses EPA standards, so they would have to, if they're marketing the water going across state lines, and they would have to be below the EPA radium standard, which Food and Drug Administration has adopted all of our standards for the water, bottled water that they have jurisdiction. There was another part of that question.
Well, I guess that made me wonder, the fact that there was radium in bottled water made me wonder, is it possible or is it just too expensive? The reason why I would think they would want to remove all the contaminants possible because they're selling, selling it at a much higher rate than you get it out.
Yeah, it just depends on how much radium is in that water. If they were selling it, across, as I said, across state lines, they would have to meet the EPA standard. The Food and Drug Administration standard, which equals the EPA standard. If they were using surface water, it's not likely that it would have any radium in it. If they were using groundwater as their source and didn't treat it, it could have radium. It would just depend on what the label says.
Yeah, they reported radium, so I guess my real question is...
Do they have a number or just...
I don't, well, they have a number of 5, but it's in a column. It's like micro or grams or picograms or something like that. So I'm confused on the units myself, but I guess my question is it possible to get 0 radium water, or is it just a matter of cost?
I think Tyson, you talked about it a little bit. Tyson, are you able to expound on kind of the mechanisms and...
Well, I think it's important to understand scientific methods for measuring things in water, we can't measure zero of anything, right? So what can happen is you can treat the water to the point that our instruments say we can't detect it. It's in there. We just don't have the technology to measure it that low. You can never remove all of anything, just to be clear. Like, that's just a fact of all water treatment and all chemicals and all, is we can always treat down to where the instruments say they can't see it. And that means our instruments can't see it, just to be clear. So that's much lower than the 5 that we're currently at with the standard, but that doesn't mean it's not in there. You don't get to zero with anything because that's just not how it works. Treatment, right? You're at the molecular level. There's going to be things. But with the state called it safe, I mean, that's the other half of the conversation, right? The state does regulate bottled water in Colorado, just to be clear. It's the consumer group at the state health department, our food protection does. But it's a different monitoring frequency and a different standard and all that. But it's not just totally unregulated. There is.
I'm sorry.
Okay. I don't know if I'm putting you on the spot, but when we're talking about what we can measure, what that lowest level is, do you know the number off the top of your head?
Probably Haley's even more than I do. I
I
don't.
think it's 1 picocurie per liter is the detection limit for combined radium, so anything below 1, most laboratory instruments won't be able to detect anything below that. So if it is below that, we'll get a result that just says non-detect, which we assume is 0 just for ease of measurement purposes, but yeah, I believe it is 1 picocurie per liter.
Thank you.
Question, this is related to Trustee Goodwin asked earlier about the final rule. So you mentioned that the final rule of 5 picocuries was published in the Federal Register in 2001. And it's looked at about every 6 years.
Not every chemical is looked at every 6 years. There's a priority process for picking which ones.
So is radium looked at every 6 years?
No.
No, it's
whatever the priority decides, it's time to look at it.
Okay.
But we have to do some chemicals every 6 years, but not all 96 chemicals every 6 years.
Okay. And then how you determine what you're looking at, is that something that's written in the Federal Register as well, as far as prioritization?
I don't think there's a published prioritization scheme. At least I don't get involved with that, so I'm not really sure. But it's my understanding that it's up to the people back in Washington to, do they know of any new health effects information that would cause a chemical to have greater interest? Or does nobody know anything about it? Do we have no knowledge about any scientists that are studying this? But they would take those things into the judgment. How likely is it to find new information that's likely to change the maximum contaminant level? And if there's information that says, yeah, we know something now that we didn't know before, that would move it up in the priority scheme. But the priority is all chemicals are selected in Washington. The regions have no participation in the process.
Okay.
At least the toxicology people know. The compliance people might.
Obviously, this isn't my expertise, but I was wondering if the reports of what they are looking at ever so often, whenever they're looking at the different chemicals and radioactive substances, whatever, is that information published online?
There is a public process, and there's EPA has a website that lists all the chemicals that are under 6-year review and when. And it's EPA. If you go to www.epa.gov and then look around for drinking water, you'll find a whole bunch of sites, and there will be one that will be 6-year review.
Just one question related to an earlier question in regards to snowfall and radiant levels. This is one well within 8 wells of ours. And so radiant level can vary naturally.
That's my understanding.
It depends on the water age in these particular wells. None of us are geologists, so I don't know if the town knows how old. Some of the deep groundwater is 50,000 years old. And some of the other waters where it's like shallow wells right near a creek can be just, half a year old because it's fresh. So it's really going to depend specifically on the well. I don't know these wells. I know a lot of the radium comes from deep groundwater. And so that becomes more of a function of how many wells are in the vicinity and how hard are people sucking on those straws. They're drawing down the whole aquifer as a whole, things can get more concentrated as well because the front range is growing. And so people have been pumping a lot of our deep groundwater wells a lot over the last 50 years. But cause and effect from snow melt year to year to these wells, I think it's probably minimal because of the water age, but I don't know your geology or.
All right, thank you. Any other questions from the board?
I just have one last question. Just the state and the EPA, this is to both groups. So based on water being within spec, I'll say specification, we're under that level. Would you all support the premise, then it's safe to drink? So it's kind of an A implies B. So like you would guarantee both organizations would put that down in writing and saying, if it's under this, it's safe to drink.
That's what the Sacred Drinking Water Act would say. But it's, as I said before, it's an individual choice whether a citizen wants to consume water.
Hey Bob, I just want to make sure that the public over here still hears. Do you mind repeating that?
Yeah, as I said before, EPA would say if the water is below our maximum contaminant level, it is safe to drink. And since this is a lifetime standard, that we would say it is safe to drink for a lifetime at the levels.
Under that,
when it's under 5 picocuries per liter, it's safe to drink for a lifetime.
So has the state or the EPA ever, crazy question, have they ever been sued by a citizen because of maybe what's being claimed and things happen? I know that there's variables, but has that occurred?
I suspect it has, but I don't know the specifics.
Yeah, so Bob, earlier you said, you just spoke to the Safe Drinking Water Act, which is a federal regulation, it's a federal law. But you also mentioned earlier in our conversation that everyone is unique. So what we're doing right now is we're giving the information that we have, the facts out there, and as as individuals, you guys decide for yourselves what you feel is safe. So Bob spoke to his personal decision, which is for him. He's okay drinking it. I don't know, change your mind?
No, if I lived in this community, I would drink this water as long as it meets the standard, as long as it tastes good. If it had a bad flavor, then I might not drink it. There are some communities that have very high what we call total dissolved solids, and the water just does not taste good. And some communities put an awful lot of chlorine in their water, and a lot of citizens don't like the taste of chlorinated water, and they won't drink it.
Yeah, so go
But
back. The bottom line
it's your own choice.
Right, it is your own choice. Everyone has their own unique kind of health situation, and that's where we recommend if you do have concerns to talk to your healthcare provider, and you guys decide for yourselves. But again, we're here today to give information of what we know, where these numbers come from, how they're developed, and so that you guys can make that decision.
I think one other thing to touch on too is if your levels were ever to exceed that maximum contaminant level, you will be provided with a public notice. The regulations do require the water provider provide you with public notice about what the levels are, steps you can do to protect yourself, different health concerns. That is required to be distributed within 30 days of them being notified of the violation. So you guys will be kept in the loop, and that's just if the levels are above that maximum contaminant level.
And the idea, again, maybe another way to reiterate, glad you brought that up, is we're trying to compare that chronic versus acute. So acute meaning you take that, cup and put it in the creek and you drink it, and it could have something like E. coli, right, like bacteria that will make you sick pretty instantly, within a day, 2 days, a couple of weeks. This pollutant that we're talking about is over a lifetime, meaning you are drinking regular cups of water every day for an average of 70 years, and then the probability, meaning that one, I'm forgetting your number, it was 1 in 10,000, I think?
For this particular water system, it was 5 in 100,000.
5 in 100,000.
What can I say, cancers?
5 in 100,000 would get that cancer risk, again, if you're drinking the water every day over the course of that lifetime, around 70 years. So it's not a guarantee, even though those 5 might get sick. This is all probability and statistics that we're talking about here. So I hope people understand and kind of see the difference between, chronic versus acute. That's the big message we want to hope you guys leave this room knowing, because that's important to us.
More of a clarification, I have many concerns over water over the years. What I don't have a concern of is what I want you to clarify and what I want to be very specific on the record. Our spike in what we've seen and what we've experienced has nothing to do with what our team has or has not done. Our spike was a naturally occurring spike that we know of. It's not something that our team caused by doing or not doing anything.
I don't know of anything, but I don't have jurisdiction over the water.
And we can't necessarily speak to the day-to-day operations. That's something that your water operators would be able to speak to. But as far as we know, it's probably hard to pinpoint, but we do see natural fluctuations. Probably have seen a steady incline, multiple water systems in the area. So probably to the best of our knowledge, that's what it can be attributed to. Like I said, if there are specific questions about actual water treatment operations, those would probably be best directed to the water provider.
And there's no doubt in my mind that your assertion is correct.
Any other questions from the board?
I think there was one question, the very first question you asked about, the court appearance. I just wanted to kind of confirm. So Bob speaks for the EPA, for CDPHE, we'd have to ask our lawyers, of course. Yes. Bob is from EPA.
EPA originated, and I would have to go through a clearance process. There are attorneys in the management chain. You can make a request to the regional administrator. Chatting like this.
And so my last comment is we do have fact sheets that we put back there on the table, so maybe when you guys leave, you can grab one. I'll leave a stack of them here for you in case anyone else wants to distribute them around. They're EPA radium fact sheet, as well as if you do have concerns, there are in-house treatment systems we didn't talk about, but it's called reverse osmosis, so we do have a fact sheet about that if anyone's interested. Any recommendations about if your brand, so we don't speak to brand, but what we do on that fact sheet is we talk about what to look for specifically. There's a system in place that certifies water filters, and so we provide the specific certification number to make sure that that brand you're looking at has that certification, which will mean that it is for that contaminant. Yes. All right. I think we took up a lot of your time, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
We really appreciate it.
Next item on the agenda, resolution number 04-2020. Resolution approving project agreement with Forest Grid and Associates Inc. for design services needed to reduce or remove radius 226 through 28. Mr. Garnish.
Board of Trustees. Tonight, first of three resolutions I have in front of you is Resolution 04-2020. It's approving a project agreement with Wilson Associates for the design and engineering services needed to reduce and remove radium 26228 from the discharge of the water treatment plant. As you have probably heard, the information we reported to you over the last several weeks, a pretty extensive study looking at rising levels of radium over the last several years. And the conclusion that we're looking at all that proactive action to start this process, because we had a previous history of installing a system, lending system, and we know that process takes a long period of time. Because of the review process by CDPHE, I think they referred to 3 to 5 months. 3 months is, if you're lucky and you get the right spot, sometimes it can stretch 5 to 6 months. That's our experience with that. So we want to make sure you understand that this whole process, if it gets passed tonight, is the first step. This is for the engineering and design. The next phase, if this engineering contract is approved, is there's several months of design engineering between staff and the engineer. That process then moves to the state level, CDPHE. They have to approve any recommended design or change using best available technology. Once that's approved, it comes back, and then I'll come back before this board again with a construction contract to implement the changes that are approved by the State Department of Health. So with that in mind, a little more of a background before we get to questions is just a little history on radium that you've heard in previous workshops. Radium, again, naturally occurring. These things pop up. I know myself in different districts. I have been an operator for another district at one time where radium did spike. State put us on quarterly sampling. Within a year to 5 quarters of sampling, the radium levels dropped off and we came back into compliance. We were lucky that we didn't require an expensive treatment process. In this case, what we're talking about right here, we've seen several years worth of data. We know if we don't take some proactive measures now, it could just be a matter of time before we go out of compliance. The state referred to, when you go out of compliance, they issue a compliance notice of failure to comply. That carries the weight of the state behind it. It usually comes with a letter from the state saying you're now in exceedance. What are you going to do to fix it?
Can you speak up a little bit, please?
I'm having a hard time hearing.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'll try to do a little bit.
Scream.
I'm not a screamer. So anyway, that letter you get from the state weighs heavily when it comes to certifying water professionals that run the system. Because that tells us that we weren't quick enough to implement the system to try to minimize the impact on the citizens. This time around, we're trying to get ahead of it. And being proactive means we're presenting this resolution for you to approve tonight so that we can move rapidly through those steps. The whole process for this project was done through our RFP process. That is a process that was approved, I believe, by one of the board of trustees back in 2012. And in 2017, it was revised. And those processes were again brought back to the board to approve a group of engineers. 5 firms were approved for water-related projects. 3 firms were approved for planning and development. Out of those projects, they relate to everything from treatment plant modifications to grade removal, distribution line projects, all sort of things that you'll see coming for you, not only tonight, but in the next several months. Projects that were budgeted for, the board approved the budget, so the money's there. The group of 5, when the RFP process went out, we sent that out to all 5 firms. Those 5 firms reviewed it. They showed up for a site visit, which was required, and then they went back to their offices and they decided among themselves whether they would bid this project or not. In the end, for radio, we had 2 out of the 5 send in submittals. Those 2 firms,
Excuse me, they did or they, I'm sorry, Tom.
They did.
Or they, oh, they did. 2 out of the 5.
They submitted for this specific project.
Thank you.
Okay, but I'll talk about the other ones when I get to them. But you just need to understand that the process for RFP, or on-call engineers, is a fully vetted process. We require a lot of things from the engineers, not only their staff, their experience, their expertise, everything. If they've done radium-type projects before, things like this all come into play. Senior staff of the water department reviews these proposals. We decide that this is the one we want to present to the board, and then we put together a package. It's what you have in front of you tonight, the resolution to this contract. Now, again, I want to emphasize that this is the most opportune time to move forward with a project like this. If we delay this and it stretches another month or 2, I have some serious doubts whether the system would be able to be in place to start treating the water before the end of the year, just because of the long time requirements that the state has been reviewed. Okay, so speaking of radium, get back to RFP for a second and kind of bounce around a little bit. This whole process, when we started out in 2017, was done for a series of continuing service agreements. Those are contracts that the board passed back then for every one of the 5 firms. They all have an individual continuing service agreement. Now, the projects weren't assigned to them at the time because we didn't know what we're going to use them for. And just understand the RFP process, again, was spread out to all the available firms that could bid for this. Sometimes we have 1 firm bid, sometimes we have 2, sometimes we have 4 firms. A lot depends on what the area expertise is, and do they have the right staff available, and do they have the time to do it. So with that, I'd like to just step back a little bit, and I want you to understand that this has all been a collaboration between the staff and the 5 firms that we met with in the initial stages, and that I'm recommending that we take action tonight so we get this process going forward. Are there any questions?
Questions from the board?
This is, Tom, I might misunderstand it, so please educate me. So based on the solutions, and again, I'm in full support, we gotta fix this, so I'm there. But I think from some data you shared, I think there were 3 options. So what's to say, and correct me, but if you're making a recommendation, because I don't think it should be a dollar issue, I think it should be a solution. I support that. But if you go and you do the necessary work and you submit it to the state, and the state comes back, or the EPA, whichever entity, and says, well, you know, you might want to do this. That's why I was asking that question. So is that an option there before you jump forward to say, hey, I want to do this? You send it to them, they go, hey, that's a great idea. You go do your project. But before we start awarding, because what would happen if your engineering starts getting deep into it, but the state says, hey, you know, you might want to do this option. And I'm asking you, because I'm just listening to what they're saying, and again, the number is not a priority. Priority is to get it fixed for the residents. So help me understand this.
Okay, the state lists what they call best available technology. We sometimes refer to the documents as BoT. That will normally show you the technologies that are available to try to remove the contaminant that you're trying to remove. The best available technology will vary somewhat depending on the contaminant that you're trying to remove. For radium, it's a list of 3 to 4 that I know of. There could be 1 more. But the engineers, when they look at that, they look at, one, the cost of the application, how hard would it be to put in, and is your water quality, does it fit very well with what you're trying to do? Okay, for us, when we tried blending in 2016, one of the bigger problems we had was finding a source that we could blend with. Because our system is not very centralized, spread out throughout town. None of our wells, very few of our wells combine in one plant. Most of them are single wells, and our shallower wells just get some chlorination and they go right into the distribution system. Bigger wells, our deeper wells, have to go to a treatment plant. So when you have this technology and you're trying to think about something like blending, that's really not a very good option for us, other than using the existing water that's already in your system, basically making a big loop, coming back and helping dilute that well. And once that system was implemented in 2016, thinking ahead, it was going to buy us some time. And that's what it exactly did. It bought us about 2 to 3 years. And actually, about maybe a year after or so, we started seeing the levels creeping up. Right away, we were already thinking as a staff that we're going to have to do something, another form of treating that water. And that's most likely going to involve a method to reduce it by removing it. We're trying to remove it as best we can, close to zero. But the state was telling you can never get down to zero because of the instruments. When you get a report back on something they can't, it comes back what they call BDL, means below detected. For us, we got into zero. That means they can't pick it up on instruments. So when we're talking about dilution, for us in 2016, that was the right way to go. It was very cost effective. It could be implemented a lot quicker. The state already had other systems that were using blending as an alternative method, and that's what we were presented to the board at that time. And that's what we got approved and installed. But probably within a year of that system, we were already thinking we were going to need something of an ion exchange, hydrous, manganese oxidation, or potentially trying to filter it out through whether it's an RO system or some other filtering system.
That's what got us back in compliance, correct?
Yes, once we did the blending, we've been doing quarterly sampling ever since. And that's all the documents we presented to citizens every year on our CCR. They know what our radium is. We have to sample radium at every single well, okay, or what they call the entry point to distribution. The difference is well 3 and 9, where the problem is, we've been on quarterly sampling ever since 2016. The other wells are on a 3-year cycle, so they hadn't showed an increase in radium, so we're well below that, you hear the term MCL, maximum contaminant level. But what I worry about it as the experienced water operator here is we're going to treat at well 3 and 9 for this to try to mitigate this problem as quickly as we can before it hits that MCL limit. Because once it hits the MCL limit, it's not so much we're going to do anything different that we're going to head down. The difference is now you have to notify the public within 30 days. And you get a letter. Last in 2016, we had to keep sending that letter. I believe it was every quarter. We had to send, I think we sent at least 3 letters from the original, not the state. And the letters have very specific health effects language that the state doesn't allow you to read. And it will tell you if you drink that water over a long period of time, it can raise your risk of getting certain types of cancer. And that's just a fact that's put out there, and we're always, as operators, we're always trying to be as transparent as we can to make everybody understand that this is a risk that we're taking, that we're trying to treat. Okay, so when you're looking at radium, it's not uncommon in this area. We're not the only ones. But we're trying to be as proactive as we can. And that's kind of where we're at now.
I guess, I know you guys are here to fix it, and I'm not asking that. I know that, and you got my support 300%. My question is based on optional solutions and coming tonight. So you've already got that solution. You pick your solution.
Yeah, we have not picked a solution, but we know what solutions are available.
So here's my question. I'm going to come back again. On your choices, so let's say there's 3. So if you pick number 2, hypothetically, in hearing what the state EPA said tonight, you have the luxury of proposing that to them and based on their information saying, that's a great idea to have a monument, or you might want to look at this. That's what I'm asking, because
I
I
don't
mean, that's almost like, those are the guys, so
Right.
that's why I'm asking.
Right, but when you think about the Department of Public Health, they let all the systems know and all the operators know what those best available technologies are. Those are already published, well-known systems that are, and every system might use a different one to get to the same goal.
Right.
So, knowing what those systems are and consulting with our engineers and evaluating the type of water quality we have will help determine which of those will give us the most bang for our buck. The most efficient way to remove it, that will last for a long period of time. But you heard them talk about stuff called RO, restrictive. It's the most extreme treatment that you can put a water system through. It removes just about everything from the water. It costs very expensive to install. It's very expensive to maintain because it draws a lot of power. And the worst problem is, and I believe Tyson Ingalls referred to that, is now that you pull all these things out of the water, you have what us water guys call a brine stream. It's a stream of concentrated contaminants. And nobody likes it, nobody wants it. So you have to pay a lot of money for someone to come in and remove that and take it to a disposal site that would accept that waste. So if the choice for us after all our evaluations is to go with some kind of an RO type filtering system, it's one of the reasons why I budgeted such a large amount of money. I figured the worst case scenario is we have to go with an RO type filtration, and there's going to be annual costs that we'll have to build into the budget that will go with that. But that's just one. There are ion exchanges, things that pull the radium ion out, but in exchange they release the sodium. Well, because all our water ends up in a wastewater plant, the wastewater guys might have an issue with the levels of sodium. And not to mention the water that circulates around, now eventually what happens to the sodium in the water. So every one of these systems has a pro and a con, and a dollar amount associated. So that's our job as staff here, is to bring on the engineers to that RFP process and let them evaluate. We work with them hand in hand. Let them evaluate what are the best options and the best treatments for this system at this time.
So is it a fair assumption that whatever you decide, that you will not be going to the people you brought here tonight that just openly offer to look and make their suggestion or say this is great or not? That's what I'm hearing.
No, I think that's
No, I think it's more of a question of fitting our system. So they can say, hey, this big fancy option's great, but that doesn't fit in our system.
The state is not going to choose a system for us. They want us to come to them with an engineer's stamp on it saying this system is, we think, will work best. They have a whole office full of very experienced drinking water engineers that will take that proposal from the engineer that we hire and take it apart and evaluate it and look at long-term down the road. Is this gonna help Monument become back in compliance or keep them from going out of sense?
Is there a potential that you could submit that and they could say that now we don't think this is right? Is that a good? You deal with them.
I have not heard of that, but they're a state agency, a regulatory agency. They can decide that there needs to be maybe a more enhanced version of what we submit. But usually throughout this process, the engineering firm that we hire has contacts at the state level.
Right.
So they're usually asking them, or they know from experience working with them in the past, a couple of items. And that's what the whole developing what we call a technical memorandum, which is part of the process when we hire engineers. They have to produce a technical memorandum that gives us many options. And the cost, and this is what it would look like, and this is the timeline that it can be.
So do you already know which system you want?
Not exactly. I know what we're kind of leaning towards, but we're not, we need to hear more information from the engineer that will design it.
Trustee Cook,
A handful. Can you shed a little bit more light on the bid process? So they come out, 5 come out, they look at it, 2 are interested in the bid, then what?
Then it comes back to my office and I sit down with my senior staff.
What comes back to your office?
A proposal.
So these are sealed bids, correct?
No, when they come back to our office, they all come back at a certain time and we open them. They're time stamped because there's a deadline they have to be in. This is not a normal, like we bid out a construction project. That's a very different process. You have a sealed bid that's open in a public venue. These just come to our office, sealed in an envelope, but they're time stamped. And we sit around and what happens is I develop a matrix of all the, did they cover everything we're asking for? Did they include pre-design with design, did they not? So I have a little matrix that I use, that I've used for many years. And that's how we evaluate whether they're gonna meet our needs. Because some people have a great bid, number-wise, but when you look at it, they're missing an important part of it. You know, sometimes they just forget, that's happened. They don't list their subcontractors, for example. Or they might not fully, there's questions that a lot of firms should ask, and sometimes they do. If a firm that's going to do this submits a question to us, what we do is we take that question, we answer that question, and we send the same question and answer to all 5 firms. So again, transparency, making sure everybody is bidding on the same thing, has the same information. Because we don't want someone to bid because they had additional information that the other did.
So are the bids open with the bidders present and together?
No, they're all opened by staff in the same room, but the bidders are not present. They can choose to be. Most of them just drop it off. And that's how it's worked for on-call engineering. It's a little different process.
With the firm that you're recommending, especially given that the presenters today weren't able to name a municipality that addressed this concern and was able to completely eliminate the radium levels, just lower. Do we have you done this before? I want to know what municipality it's been done with, and I want to know what their levels were and what they are now.
I don't think Mr. Coburn came prepared to answer that specific question, but he's here to answer questions.
Is that one that you can follow up on?
I can tell you this would be there's been 3 times before that I've evaluated radium issues, and the treatment alternatives, we are designing an ion exchange system for municipality down south here. We've evaluated RO systems, so it's involved with a couple of big RO projects as well. So we have the breadth and depth of experience to address this treatment.
Have you designed one that is fully operational for a water municipality that we can look at the level that they were at prior, now utilizing the system that you've designed and what their level is now?
And that's a good question. And actually, usually what happens is you go in favor of blending or maybe looking at different water sources. And so those are the things we've done in the past, in particular for radium. And in the case of ion exchange, though, we're doing ion exchange for PFAS, PFCs down south. So we're designing that system. We do have other projects we've done that on.
Do you have a system, and I guess this will be the last time that I'll ask it, do you have a system that you have designed to address the specific problem that is fully operational, functioning, and you have a success rate that you can share with this board that you went from this level to this level? We're talking $700,000 here, taxpayer dollars, for something that CDPHE and the EPA was broader, and I appreciate your information, but we don't have any municipalities here in our district that have designed something and gone from this level to 0. So when we're talking $700,000, $1 or $2 matters. You better believe it.
Right, absolutely.
So you do have a municipality that you have designed that is fully operational, that you have implemented, it's up, it's running, and you can show us the data that went from this to this.
Well, for radium in particular.
Specifically radium removal.
Yeah. We have designed systems like this for other contaminants, and we've evaluated radium a number of times.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Colbert. Question for you. How many years has your firm been supporting Monument and the different water projects that we've had?
Since 2012, so 8 years. And I worked for Monument and Trustees prior to that with another firm.
Okay, so you probably know our water situation there pretty well.
Yes, ma'am.
Trustee Stevens?
No, I have no questions at this time.
Trustee Clark? Okay. If there are no further questions, I will look for a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve resolution number 04-2020, a resolution approving a project agreement to Forsman Associates Inc. for design and engineering services needed to reduce and or remove radium 226 and 228 from the discharge of water treatment plants 3 and 9.
We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ms. Hogan?
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Trustee Kubin?
No.
Trustee Bornstein?
No.
Trustee Clark?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes. The motion dies on a tie, 3-3. Resolution number 05-2020, a resolution awarding a project agreement to the design, engineering, of water treatment plant 7 modifications. Mr. Thurmish.
Okay, this project in front of you right now, this resolution, is for modifications to water treatment plant number 7. As in my background paper pointed out, this is one of our oldest plants. It's nearing 30 years old. It's our plant that has probably had the most outdated technology, and it's becoming harder and harder to find parts for it. The plan here is to replace the valves that operate that plant. Right now, they are air operated, which involves a lot of maintenance, of changing out parts, wearing air operation, to motor operated valves, which is what we have backfitted our other major plants. The motor operated valves give us a much more reliable system when it comes to running this plant. And also, maybe the bigger part of this project is to modify the existing backwash system. And that is pretty archaic, again, hard to find parts. These brass parts that have rotator assemblies in them that sometimes you have to fix yourself because it's hard to find. Again, this process is to redesign that backwash system, which is going to help us with our discharge out of this plant, because right now the system works sometimes, and sometimes it fails or a valve hangs up and the whole system trips out of backwash. And sooner or later we end up having to shut that plant down because we don't have the right technology in there to make it run efficiently. So again, the process here is through the RFP process. This is a similar, almost identical process that our radionuclide project that you just failed it is followed. All 5, actually I think 4 of the firms showed up for this site visit. In the end, for well sent for treatment plant 7, it was only Forsman Associates that bid it. None of the other firms bid it. And I think part of the issue here might have been because this project dollar-wise is not very large. Most of the firms we have tend to lean towards a larger, pretty standard, and many things to do here, replace valves and modify the design and modify the backwash system.
What was the dollar amount on this?
I believe we budgeted $250,000 for this. That, keep in mind, when that project number includes the design and engineering and the construction. Okay, so this portion of it is the design and engineering is $42,250 as an spelled out in the background paper. And the remainder of that amount is what we would use when it goes out to bid to the construction company. Any questions?
Questions from the board? Trustee Clark? Trustee Stevens? Mayor Portnoy? Trustee Cooper?
So the bid process, similar. The reason I'm focusing on the bid process is I've had concerns with the bid process for many years. I've actually had bidders, engineering groups, address concerns with me over our bid process. Priorities, I guess, is the biggest one. It's like, how are we doing the prioritization of these different projects?
I'm not quite sure I understand your priority question. All these projects were.
Well, they're all important.
Budgeted.
The radio one's important, but
Right.
how are we prioritizing? Oh, it's quite important, the process in which it was done. And that's my bigger issue. And it's with all of these. And the reality is I can say no to all these, or I can say yes to all of these. But the reality is the communication that we get, depending on the time, depending on the day, depending on the project that's being pushed, skews, and it varies and it changes. And that's the most difficult part on our end, is that we're forced, this is the first time this has been presented to me, we're being forced to make big decisions with big dollars.
What do you mean by first time? I've been before you multiple times with multiple projects.
Oh, yeah, and some
All
have passed and
budgeted.
some have failed. And the ones with more communication and the one with consistent communication tends to
such
pass
as-
more.
What would you like to
Communication
do?
with the board, direction from the board, prioritization of projects. My big concern, and it comes down to water completely, right? We heard tonight, go figure, they say that folks with renewable water, fresh water sources, have lower, if none, radium issues. And that's something that we've discussed on a variety of years. When I first came on this board 4 years ago, it was doom and gloom. It was, if you don't start pushing through, and it starts with the design phase. And I'll call them, I mean, it starts with the design phase, but I was told $17 million reuse facility. You gotta do it. This is the only way we're gonna turn the sewage water back into drinking water, and this is the only way that you're gonna have renewable water from now into eternity. And then changed. I was given a document, I was told, we're 100% aquifer based. You have 7 to 11 years before we could potentially run out. And then 4 years later, depending on what's being presented, we never said that.
You didn't hear that from me. 7 to 11, as I explained to you, I don't know, probably 4 times over the last 4 years that you've been on the board. And I don't know if anybody else heard this before. The 7 to 11 came from an issue with well number 7 years ago. We were drawing that aquifer down, and we extrapolated the data to say if we ran that well at the same rate it was being discharged, in that time frame, we would uncover the top and we'd have to shut the well down. But I also followed that up with, we made operational changes. We've actually reset that pump and motor, all of which contributed to extending the life of that well. So for you to bring 7 to 11 back up and tie it to this project.
No, I'm tying it to all the projects. I'm tying it to the lack of prioritization and how I'm expected to vote on yet another project for design and research. I don't know how many design and research projects we've approved where we haven't seen come to fruition. We got a handful of what I'll call projects to nowhere. And I want solutions, I want viable solutions long-term. And we can agree to disagree, and that's entirely fine.
Every project that I want you to do is design and engineer, because that is the first step of the process.
I think what we need to
Which
do.
was presented to us at budget time and was on our list of
All these
priorities
projects
in the
were in the
budget.
2020 budget.
That
All of
we are gonna do this project, and this project, and now you're saying.
I
that
remember
we-
the budget I voted no on, absolutely. But what I'm saying is, what I'm saying is we have a water master plan that's designed by the primary engineering group that gets the majority of our contracts. I have an issue with
They
that.
win the bid process.
And we've
There's no
discussed the bid
preferences given
process.
here. None whatsoever. They were given
So
the
is-
same information.
So there's
as
no
every
real,
other firm.
there's no additional questions regarding this resolution. Thank you.
Trustee Bornstein, any questions? At this point, I'll look for a motion.
I move resolution number 5, 2020, resolution awarding a project agreement for the design engineering of the water treatment plant. Number 7, modifications project for Forest Green.
A motion and a second. Ms. Hogan?
Trustee Bornstein?
I'm going to abstain on this, please.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Koopman?
I'll vote no.
That motion dies on a tie vote. Resolution number 062020. A resolution approving a project agreement to Forest Green Associates for design engineer service needed for the Raspberry Lake distribution project. Mr. Tharnish.
Okay, the resolution in front of you now, Resolution 06, this is to replace the distribution mains that are in the Raspberry Lane subdivision. That subdivision is our most, subdivision with the highest number of water breaks over the last several years. A lot of it has to do with the type of pipe that's in there, the terrain that it's laying on the bedrocks. We have spent a lot of money over the last several years on that particular subdivision, just repairing breaks that occur because of the age of the infrastructure. Now, in the budget for this year, we originally tried to budget somewhere in the neighborhood of $400,000 to upgrade large sections of distribution main. And when we had to cut back the budget, and that severely reduced our ability to do large sections, we were able to put this project together to address the needs of the people that live in that subdivision. And if you think about it, that's a lot of people. There's 48 service connections that are tied to this main, not counting the 4 or 5 that border in on North Mountain Lake. Again, this project here, we had all 5 firms show up for that, I believe, and 4 out of 5 did. Very competitive. All the firms had covered all the bases, they all met the requirements, but in the end, Forest Green Associates came out slightly lower in accordance, just like the other 2, in accordance with our own purchasing ordinance. It says you're supposed to choose a low responsive bidder. Every project we do is like that. The bidder here was Forest Green. Now, if this is the 3rd time you heard his name come up, maybe he has a knack for bidding projects. He did not get any other information like is sometimes being insinuated here. He followed the rules, all these RFP process, the continual service agreements, the project agreements, all this is fully looked at by the town attorney. Legally, there's nothing wrong with anything we do, and we're going to continue down that process of doing RFPs. That's why the board approved an on-call engineering process starting back in 2012. Now, in 2017, some of the firms changed, some came on, some left. The current continuing service agreements are good until 2022. In 2022, we have options. We can bid it out again on RFQ process and have firms bid that. Some firms may choose to leave us, depending on what they do. But getting back to the specifics of this particular project. This is a project that is going to improve the water infrastructure in that neighborhood. It's my guys, I got to go out there at 2 o'clock in the morning, usually on a holiday, in freezing weather to fix a water main. And you know, I refer back to my senior operator here that, you know, when he tells his kids he's got to go to the water break, the first question we ask him, oh, is it Raspberry Lane? That's a notorious area. It's a narrow road. It has multiple utilities underground power, gas, sewer. It's a very difficult environment. And we're trying to improve the quality in there, not only for the citizens, but for my operators that got to get in there and repair these things. And by allowing this project to move forward, we're going to take that much needed step that we've been planning for years. The only reason we didn't present it in previous years is because this project is a very valuable contract. It's $345,000 is what we think it's going to take for engineering, design, installing 1,400 feet of main, replacing 4 hydrants, and re-tapping all 48 service connections. So everybody has a very reliable service, and we shouldn't have to go back in there for a lot of years. So that's what this project entails. And again, identical IRP process, all 4 firms did this. Orphan came out as the low responsive bidder. Like I said, it's in the purchasing ordinance that we go by. Any questions?
Trustee Bornstein?
Yeah, these are friendly questions. Just the Raspberry Lane, help me, my mind's, is that where the condos on the backside of the?
Yeah, they're up on a little bit of a rise above the lake, on the north side of the lake.
Okay, that's my first question. And my second question, you know, I've been the biggest proponent as we've had discussions about the infrastructure, and it has to be addressed. We've talked about this for years, so by definition, this would fall really under that. This is just like a phase of doing it that you're going to have to look at a later date, am I correct?
Yes.
Okay, and last question, if this is awarded tonight, and the world's perfect, when would this be completed? Or when would you like to see it completed?
The plan is to complete this project before the end of the year. We would like to start construction before next winter sets in, and hopefully that will occur mid to late summer. The weather holds out. Again, I'll have to come back to you once the engineer has what they call engineer's estimate of probable cost, that we'll know what this project should cost. And then when it goes out to bid for construction, we compare that number to the bids that come in. If they come in fairly close to that, then I'll bring that to the board as another resolution to approve a construction contract to whoever the contractor ends up.
Well, my understanding of this is part of what we've discussed and pushed up the infrastructure, having to do this. So this, okay, you answered all my questions. Thank you.
Trustee Coogan? No questions. Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
No questions.
Trustee Stevens?
So you said this is a high, we had 2 water main breaks last year. You said this is a high area of risk for additional water main breaks?
Yes.
Trustee Clark? Seeing no questions, I'll look for a motion.
Motion for resolution number 06/2020, a resolution approving a project agreement with Forest Green Associates for design and engineering services needed for the Raspberry Lane distribution project.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
A motion, a second, Ms. Hogan?
Mayor Pro Tem Elliott?
Yes.
Mayor Wilson?
Yes.
Trustee Stevens?
Yes.
Trustee Koopman?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
No.
Trustee Bornstein?
Yes.
That motion passes 5-1. Takes us to the public comment portion of our agenda. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes. Do we have anyone who would like to make public comment? Mr. Campbell, I saw you first. Okay, Maggie.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a comment. I think the Darnish and all the people are doing such a fantastic job protecting the town. And you two guys and lady, ma'am, you guys scare the hell out of the people, the town, and you worry about the taxpayers, but you scare them to death and don't even approve what he comes up with. What kind of trust you guys? It's unbelievable. You guys are pathetic.
Mr. Kimball?
Due to weather cancellations in my schedule, I'd like to first point out a correction regarding the NAS representative comments addressing my concerns during last month's meeting referencing the access road connection to Sanctuary Ring Drive in Glenville. Nobody corrected her as a statement that I made. She stated the statement I made with broad comments and information. 2016 El Paso County Major Transportation Corridor Plan was not accurate. She claimed the data I stated was only referencing 2040 future traffic. Facts, you can see slide number 2, map 5, clearly shows existing traffic values, which is at 15,000 vehicles on that visits. Slide 3, map 6, existing capacity analysis, reflecting that this road is congesting presently, as well as Struthers Road. This is all reference on east side 25. Slide 4, existing in 2040 traffic volumes, Baptist Road increased from 15,000 to 27,000 plus vehicles. Annotated also is Highway 105 east of 25, which numbers should raise an eyebrow, since these are two major collector roads leading to Highway 25. Again, this information and knowledge is for you the next time you ask developers who are supposed to have the community's best interest, provide accurate information which then they can honestly be discussed, since it will result in residents living in the town that will have to deal with issues such as traffic, roads, conditions, and such, before the developers just move on to the next project. Recommendations that we've made previously about the roads and the path of Sanctuary Point residents, developers, contractors, and subcontractors. I've attended meetings in Classic Homes and Challenger Homes. They basically told us that we have to deal with the growth and the development. That's just something we have to deal with. Why they told people in Sanctuary Point residents, future residents looking to purchase homes there, construction traffic has been diverted to reduce the impact of the community and looking out for their concerns. Our concern in Promontory Point is that we have approximately 9 bus stops on Glen Eagle that have blind spots. We want to look after everyone's safety, especially the children. Bringing up this matter is a long-term and regarding development for an emergency action plan, while the town of Monument has grown on the east side, Highway 25 by 22% in the past few years, with another 1,000 homes coming online in the future. Slide 4, almost 30,000 vehicles for Highway 105, that doesn't raise a concern. I'm sure it will in time of emergency. Town manager mentioned working with Tri-View El Paso County, annexing Highway or Higley Road to Monument. Additionally, stated the possibility of having roundabouts installed. Promontory Point residents have requested to have either mini 3-point roundabouts, lateral shifts, or chicanes installed on Glen Eagle. These requests were made verbally at prior meetings with town staff over the past few years with no answer. Lateral shifts and chicanes have proven to reduce speeding by 25%, speeding reduction to the 85th percentile, which is about 11 miles per hour reduction in speed.
Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Any other public comments?
I just would like to set the record straight. I represent a firm of over 100 people, great professionals. Water treatment is what we do, and it's because we protect the financial interests of our clients that we provide treatment as a last resort in some cases where it's a very expensive to take out particular contaminants. And so the reason that we have some projects before that we didn't go all the way through with treatment is just because we're being good stewards of the funds that our clients have. And so we provided all kinds of treatment for all kinds of contaminants, and we were very well qualified for the work. Just wanted to clear that up.
Thank you, Mr. Any other public comments? Sure.
I just want to say, I appreciate all of you guys' service. I appreciate you being up there and making these big decisions and being concerned about the water. Personally, I live on this side. I drink this water. I know many people who asked me to come here tonight to represent them. And you know, I can't help but feel that we now have the opportunity to do something about the water. Okay, your concern was about the water. Now we have the opportunity, and you guys dropped the ball. Now nothing's going to be done. I mean, you talk about renewable water, that ain't happening for 5 years. Okay, so you're just going to let us go for 5 years. I'm really disappointed. I mean, I have the utmost respect for each and every one of you, but you dropped the ball. I'm sorry. I can't even think right now, so I gotta go.
Thank you. Any other public comments? Seeing none, I'll move ahead with board authorizations. Ms. Hogan, we don't have anything in the plan currently.
Nothing on the agenda.
Okay. Anybody on the board have any board authorizations?
I would love to add a few. I would like to add the discussion that more companies be included in the future bidding process, and how those bids are determined. Maybe go over and review the
the process, discuss that. And then I'd like to have up for discussion of the budgeting items for renewable water, discussion for renewable water purchases. And I'd also like to explore regional renewable partnerships for water resources on the next meeting.
Okay, I'm not interested. Other board members interested in that?
I'd be interested in doing what needs to happen, which is we need to have communication and we need to talk about options. I don't want to do another workshop that makes no sense. What I want to do is absolutely evaluate the bid process, because our bid process does include a sealed bid process, in which time the people who bid are in the room when they're opened and discussed and things like that. I think that's imperative. I would absolutely, specific to radiant removal, as a West Side resident who has 4 kids who also drink the water, and I drink the water, and I have for the majority of my life, and will continue to for the rest of my life, as long as I'm here at least. We need to expand specifically for this to look at the folks who've done this. It has been done. We were told it has been done. CDPHE says it has been done. I want to hear from those people. I want to hear from those firms. I want to hear the numbers that were there. I want to hear the numbers that are there now. I want to see effectiveness. We heard from CDPHE that it will never be completely removed.
So what is your board authorization?
So the authorization is that we have continued dialogue and we figure out an actual plan, instead of saying, approve this for $87,000 to start looking at it. So I want to discuss that.
Start over.
It's not starting over. It's being included in discussions and information caught up. As far as I know, in 2016, we had the non-compliance issue. We got the notifications, which was great. Tom and his team did everything they were supposed to do as per the state guidelines. And guess what? It worked. It reduced it back down to compliance levels. Who knew that there was any significant risk that's still being talked about, until all of a sudden this thing comes up and it's this doom and gloom scenario? We're never going to have another opportunity to do this. Yes, we will. Next week and the week after and the week after and the week after, until we find a solution that works. Just because I don't agree with the solution that was here, or
I think we were talking about getting a jump on it before it beats those levels, not waiting.
Great, so let's do
till
it.
After it.
Let's do it. Let's talk about what wasn't preferred through this current process. Where can we improve, and how can we get to the solution that we all want? Nobody's debating that. I think the only thing that was debated tonight was the process that was done and the communication, the way in which it was handled. And possibly the firm that presented it. I don't know. I want to know who's done it. I want to know what their effectiveness has been. And if they say we've got no answers, who knows? Maybe then we do the RFP again. But the fact is, notices went out, problem resolved, back to compliance levels. All of a sudden, boom, this doom and gloom scenario where we got to do it now. Let's reevaluate, let's talk about it, let's get more information. That's the only thing that we have, and the only thing that's inconsistent, the only thing that this board lacks is information. And it's always make the decision now. I want more information before I spend that amount of money for a potential of not having any effect whatsoever. That's all I want, is information. So that's my authorization, is that we somehow come up with a platform where we can actually get educated and have information and dialogue to get to the solution we all want.
So can we go back to, you had 3.
Yes.
What were they? Name one, please.
To add more companies to the bidding process.
You have 13, correct, Tom?
But
Well, like,
You have
when
13.
we did the RFQ process, there were 12 firms that applied. We narrowed the list down to 5 because a lot of those firms were strictly just road and bridge firms. There were firms that we don't have a lot of bridges to maintain, so they were not selected. But what gets me is the board at that time approved the list. And you had bios, you had RFQs this thick on every firm that applied.
And I remember reading them all.
I wasn't here.
We're not asking you if you were here. saying. That's not, it's a question.
Can I have a question related?
I recall reading those 13 because no other board member showed up to read them.
So I also recall seeing the 13 that was presented. I also recall whittling down the list. But how do we pick the experts that we're going to use in the future if we don't know the problems and the projects that are going to be coming up in the future? So I think to lock in and say, well, these are the ones that we're going to use for whatever, not knowing that, hey, we need to come up with a reverse osmosis radium removal system. Is that on your list here so we can make that? I think there's got to be some fluidness to it, where a cookie cutter approach to non-cookie cutter problems, it doesn't make sense.
I think you also have to take into consideration, this is a long process, identifying 12 companies that are qualified to do the job and then narrowing it down to another list, and then going through the bidding process is not something that can be done in a week's time. So I think that's probably the issue here, is that we've already been through this whole process of narrowing it down and whittling it and stuff like that. And what it sounds to me, I could be misunderstanding, but what it sounds to me is like we're going to now start over again.
I just wanted a discussion of adding more companies to the 5. Mr. Foreman told me that all we had was 5 companies and that the board, some prior board had approved 5 companies. In order to get more companies, I would have to introduce the idea to the board to put it on a board authorization item for discussion, which is why I did that.
How many companies are there that do this, Tom?
For water projects,
Yes.
I would venture to say there's, in this state alone, there's gotta be 40 of them, 50 of them.
Okay.
But understand, if you're gonna start the RFQ process again, I can almost guarantee you this project will not get done this year. So that's 3 more quarters of sampling we're gonna run through, where we're gonna approach that limit. And the minute we get under the limit, it's not gonna matter, because the state's gonna say, choose a firm and get going. Because now you're putting your public in
The
danger.
state didn't say that we had to choose a firm and get going. The state didn't say we didn't have to do anything different than what we're already doing.
I don't believe that's what they said.
I'm pretty sure that's what they said, that we're in compliance.
What you
And
said
when we're out
was-
of compliance, then they make recommendations.
So what
which
you're
we
saying
did.
is we need to go out of compliance in order to motivate you to make a decision. Is that
No,
not what
what
you're
I'm
saying?
saying is, in order to motivate me, specific to this topic, out of those 5 that we sent the bids out, or the RFQ out to, which of those 5 have designed a system that does exactly what we needed to do and can show us that it works? None. So why wouldn't we reach out to the experts who have done it and have had success with it to at least see if they're interested in helping us? It'd be foolish not to. Why reinvent the wheel? Go to what's been done, go to what's effective, present the data and the facts, and we vote on it tonight. Let's do it. Where are they?
That's
It hasn't been done. So again, we're going to waste, you want to talk about wasting time, we're going to waste a whole year, except $81,000 later, a whole year, and I guarantee you know what's not going to happen? We're not going to have any sort of system in place or even ground broken to fix this issue, because I've seen it over the years, long before I came on the board. I'm tired of wasting money, especially to the water system. We have lots of opportunity to improve. Let's do it. Let's put the money where it needs to be. Raspberry Lane, boom, distribution system. We have to fix the old infrastructure. Got it. Guess what? Money approved. But we're talking about stuff that needs to be addressed, but it would be foolish to do it in this cookie cutter way. Well, I'm going to reach out to the 5 people who have not done this before, even though we know people who have, and we're going to give $81,000 to reinvent the wheel. I'm not okay with that. And I'm a West Side resident, and I drink water, and my kids drink water. It is important. So, but I'm not going to throw my hands up and say we're done with it just because this one thing failed. It's ridiculous.
Does the board agree with looking into or opening our on-call or adding additional on-call service, or on-call engineers.
Yeah, I agree to that. I don't agree to going through our RFQ process and micromanaging public works and getting into analysis paralysis because we have to time and time again when the board actually has already approved the RFQ process before. And that's how things go. One board comes in, they take over, the next board comes in during, the elections. So, that's kind of how things work. So I don't agree with looking at the RFQ process. Additional companies, yes.
Okay. So I will add to a board agenda looking at additional on-call engineer companies. What was your second one?
Looking at the budget for renewable water purchases.
I believe we do that consistently, don't we?
Do we buy any? Renewable water shares.
Mr. Thornish?
In the 2A fund, there is money available to pursue renewable projects. The problem is, there's no renewable projects to pursue. We have explored options coming, and I know our town manager has mentioned the Colorado Springs Utilities potential tie-in, but there's nothing to put money into yet. Nobody has any agreements, nobody's approved anything. You are years out.
I believe that there are opportunities out there that we haven't had the chance to discuss, and I would like to be able to discuss them. How to purchase renewable water shares and explore regional renewable partnerships for water resources. As a board, I would like us all to discuss it.
It's already being discussed.
I don't see a resolution has occurred yet, so maybe we can discuss it one more time while I'm here.
Okay. I'm not interested.
I'll rephrase, communication. We need to have continued dialogue on this stuff. We need to have continued dialogue on renewable water, on regionalization.
Did you have a third item, Trustee Clark?
I threw the budgeting for renewable water purchases and exploring regional renewable partnerships for water resources together. And that's the 1, 2, and 3 that you're not interested in.
I'm interested in the first one. Trustee Clark? Or, excuse me, Trustee Koopman?
I will just say it'd be foolish not to continue and have continued dialogue on these issues. I don't like that we talk about water once a year and this is where we are and this is where we're going and guess what, it changes every year. We need to have continued dialogue, so I don't care if it's a quarterly hour discussion that we talk about it, an update. I couldn't tell you the last I heard about the
board authorization.
Yes, regular communication and dialogue in an open setting, so that we can all be informed and updated.
Okay, is the board agreeing with that? Okay.
Can you define that?
Regular?
Because I believe I have communicated to you, I don't know how many times I've been director since 2012. Every project that has come before you was presented either through a budget process where you could ask questions, which you usually do. Do we need a budget for this? Are we going to do anything renewable this year? Are we going to build a new storage tank? All of those have been before you. And what I'm hearing is from one trustee in particular of how you tell me constantly that we don't communicate. And I can't think of anything else that I haven't done to communicate the needs of this community related to water projects. And it's like either you're not hearing it or you just don't want to hear it. I don't know what it is. But tell me so I can give you what you want.
Okay. And I think it may be in which the way that it's communicated. The way that I view communication is not you coming saying this is what we need, approve this. I don't view that. Ask for money or a approval for a project is communication. What I want is a status update. I want dialogue. I want interaction, collaboration. I want to learn. I want to verify. I want to be educated by outside individuals on the totality of what we're working with here. Monument is still a closed loop system. For 4 years, we've tried to be not a closed loop system, but no, I have heard nothing other than when you view it as someone saying, I'm not getting the communication. But the fact is, I have no idea where we stand or where the last bit of effort was ever done on actually not being a closed loop system. I would like to know that. I asked probably 6 to 8 months ago, hey, we've got Tri-View Water on the west side of the interstate now. What does that look like? How much does it cost to connect? When can it happen? Nothing, no update. So what I mean, answer your question specifically, I would like no less than 1 time per month to not have an ask about the water projects, updates, questions, opportunity for dialogue, both ways on the totality of our water scenario. Good, bad, or indifferent. That's what I would like at least once a month.
I got 2 things on those tones. One, there was a vulnerability assessment that was conducted not even 2 years ago that spelled out all the possible interconnects with neighboring districts. This board took no action, none. Didn't appropriate the money. After the research we put into that, it's like a slap in the face. It's like they told me that we're not going to pursue that. And even when we do have the opportunity to do that, you guys like, and again, I'm not specifically directed to any one of you, but as a board, you don't, I don't know how to say this, you don't put a lot of effort into supporting staff in the research we do to give you what you want. It's like the staff, my staff right here, whether it's Public Works or Water, every day I have to deal with, do I need to still be working here? They have lost interest. And I feel a little bit of that every time I got to present something. And you turn it down for various reasons. And they're not always the same. But when they tell me that I don't communicate to you all the various options, I have bent over backwards, giving you reports, giving you dollar values, scheduling things. I mean, I even do water workshops for the benefit of the board and the public. And there's certain board members here that I've never seen go to a workshop. And you know who I'm talking about. So to say that I don't try to communicate or
And I'm not saying you don't try to communicate.
Oh, that's what you said.
I apologize if it came out of where I say I want communication. And the way that I'm talking about communication is both ways. So this is good because what I'm asking for, what we do, apparently frustrates the heck out of you.
Oh,
and what I'm saying is,
no idea.
and what I'm saying is the way that you do what you do also is frustrating to at least me as a trustee. So what I'd like to do, let's communicate. Let's figure out a way to somehow figure out how to communicate that better together. If what I'm asking for, you feel that you're delivering, and vice versa, and see if we can get on the same page.
So if we have
as far as
board authorization for updates monthly, I would venture to say quarterly would be appropriate because we're not going to be doing any water projects anyway. So, with monthly update.
Quarterly's fine, yeah. I mean, the reality is, a quarter from now, I'm not going to be on the board, but I would like to have the information
the board
open. I mean, communication, that's what this comes down to. I mean, there's priorities, and that's one thing that I appreciate them touching on today. And this is dialogue, it's important, and it's important to determine what exactly an authorization item is. But they said the priorities, it varies. It comes down to financial, it comes down to different things. The water tank, the closed loop system, the renewable, all of these things. I just want community dialogue and trustee dialogue and open dialogue and the ability to go back and forth. And that can't be done when you say, this is the project, here are the detailed vote now, and then you're upset because it either passes or fails.
Board agreement for quarterly water updates?
Quarterly.
Okay. Any other board authorization items? Okay, move on to Board of Trustee comments. Do we have any Board of Trustee comments?
I'm just gonna make a comment, and it's, you know, Socrates, Plato said nothing's absolute. I know it's absolute that this board, everything's getting personal. and it's really, it's very disappointing, and I've seen it for 7+ years. And like, you know, we're donating our time, people are working hard, and, you know, we all have different responsibilities, and we're supposed to work as a team. But when something doesn't happen, the responsibility of the board is a fiscal responsibility to those that elected them, and you have a fiscal responsibility to the town to get certain things done. And sometimes they don't match, but it's getting personal and having the same residents, which is like less than one hand I can hold up, that comes and throws rocks, but you don't see those people volunteering. Everybody up here is working hard. I'm disappointed. I'm just really disappointed because, you know, it's like, this is like a no thanks job. It really isn't. You know, we're trying our best. Or I'm going to say I'm trying my best. I am. But, you know, I wanted to pass this tonight, but I am not giving a goddamn blank check for $700,000. I thought there was going to be a system sitting there. And if I would have been this way, I would have given a $15 million reuse facility, and you didn't even know what kind of facility you wanted. So I think we both have an obligation. Bring your A game, because you know what we need, and then the board can approve it. But don't make it personal. It's just like this. It's just not good. It's not being a good role model. Your kids are watching on YouTube, or it's embarrassing. I'm just totally embarrassed to be here. You know what? I got like a month and a half and I'm done. But you know what? I still love this town and I love being on the board. But be nice. Be nice.
Is there any other board of trustee comments?
I'd like to mention that Mr. Garnish does not report directly to the board. He reports to our town manager. And I don't believe it's the board's job to micromanage our water experts and our public works department. And we should have more respect for the years of experience that that department brings to the table and contributes to this town, because getting beaten up like they are tonight is going to probably cause potential resignations, because they can only take it for so long. But Mr. Garnish, I hope you stick around, because your expertise is respected by many of us on the board, and I hope that your whole department sticks around as well and continues to contribute and do the excellent work that you've been doing.
Any other board of trustee comments? Mr. Thornish, I've been on this board for 4 years also, and I understand that it is quite common that the information you pass on to board members goes on ignored, and then we shout that we need more information. And no matter how many times we go, I guess you're just going to have to keep presenting it. But I'm grateful to you and your staff, and they do a great job with our water. So with that being said, if there's a motion to adjourn. Motion. All in favor? Aye.